My parents are living in this house, so you need to go back to your parents' place, my husband said suddenly. I was taken aback by his words. He seemed to think he was making perfect sense. What now? You got complaints? Don't argue with what I'm saying. I'm totally okay with divorcing you, he asserted. Lately, he'd been cold to me, and I had my own grievances. I had been considering divorce as well, but I didn't think being kicked out of the house was fair. I mean, I'm the one paying the $1,800 for the living expenses. I wondered if he even remembered that. As I stared at him in disbelief, he lost his patience and snapped, "Get out of this house already. If you're here, my parents won't feel comfortable coming." I truly didn't understand why I had to leave, but I said, "All right, I'll take everything I bought with me." Once I agreed, my husband, contented, said, "Get on with it then," and left. I immediately called a resale shop. "My name is Emily. I currently live with my husband Robert, who's 5 years my senior. We met when mutual friends introduced us, and we unexpectedly bumped into each other while hanging out with them. This led to us spending a day off together. I'm actually thinking of becoming a voice actor. I'm studying for it now," Robert said. Listening to Robert, I thought his deep voice was indeed impressive. I've always had a soft spot for soothing voices and felt drawn to his. He probably sensed my interests. Soon, we exchanged contact information and suggested hanging out alone. Before we knew it, we started dating. Neither of us explicitly said we should date, but we found ourselves in a relationship. Being young at the time, I thought this must be what adult romance feels like. I had just graduated from college and started working, so maybe I was taken by the idea of dating someone who seemed so mature compared to me. Seeing this, my best friend Ashley expressed concern. "Are you sure about dating someone 5 years older?" I confidently replied, "It's fine. Age gap relationships aren't that uncommon nowadays. I really like Robert and he feels the same about me. There's nothing to worry about." Seeing my conviction, even Ashley, who was initially concerned, said, "Well, if you say so, Emily." Robert and I continued dating for about 3 years, and he eventually brought up marriage. I had mentioned him to my parents, and although they knew he was 5 years older, they were eager to meet him. Given this pressure, I often found myself wondering when he would propose. He proposed to me during one of his usual visits to my apartment, where we just hang out and relax. Normally, I'd expect a proposal to happen in a more romantic setting, but this casual approach felt very much like Robert. I didn't mind it. In response to Robert's proposal, I said, "Sure, let's get married." Perhaps we were both a bit nonchalant about it. After that, we went to visit each other's parents, but to be honest, I didn't really get along with Robert's folks. When we arrived at Robert's family home, the entryway and living room were crammed with what looked like antiques, though I couldn't tell where they were from. From what I could see, they all seemed to be replicas or imitation pieces. As we were ushered into the living room and met Robert's parents, both were dressed in high-end branded clothing and decked out in gaudy jewelry as they greeted me. It felt like I was meeting a stereotypical nouveau riche couple. No matter how I looked at it, our tastes and values seemed too different for us to get along. Robert's mother even remarked, "You look so average, don't you?" comparing her appearance to mine, which was quite rude. I was taken aback that the parents of the man I was thinking of marrying could be like this. But in the end, it's Robert and I who are getting married. If I don't get along with my future in-laws, then I don't really have to interact with them much. So, I decided not to let it bother me too much. After Robert and I got married and moved into our condo to start our life together, Robert came to me looking a bit anxious. "Hey, who was that woman in the blue dress among your guests at the wedding?" "Which woman in a blue dress?" There were several of my guests who wore blue dresses, so just based on that information, I couldn't figure out who he was talking about. The one who gave a speech as your best friend." "Do you mean Ashley?" "Yes, she was wearing the blue dress." Upon hearing this, Robert muttered, "So it was Ashley." "What's wrong with Ashley?" I asked, noticing he seemed visibly flustered. "Oh, it's nothing major. The other day when I was headed to work, I thought I saw someone who looked like her. That's when I remembered she had given a speech as your best friend at the wedding." I was puzzled at his sudden interest in Ashley and why he was so flustered, but he just chuckled and said, "It's nothing really," and retreated to his room before I could ask anything further. A little while later, I got a call from my best friend Ashley with some news. "Listen, Emily, my boyfriend's coming back to the US next year." Ashley had been dating her boyfriend since high school. They'd known each other since elementary school, but he had moved away in middle school. Since then, they had been writing letters to each other. By the time they got to high school, they were reunited, and that's when he confessed to her. I always felt content listening to Ashley's bittersweet love stories. I always enjoyed hearing about her love adventures. Her boyfriend, after working for a few years at his company, got transferred to an international branch and had been away from the US for some time. Despite the distance, their communication never faltered, and they remained a close-knit couple. Do you think he might propose once he's back, and then you guys will get married? Oh, Emily, you're always so quick to jump to conclusions. Just make sure to invite me to the wedding. I promise I'll give a heartwarming speech. Of course, after that touching speech you gave at your wedding, I'll definitely need you to do the same for mine. Don't set the bar too high. We shared a laugh over our tea. We could talk about anything and everything, completely trusting one another. If one of us had a problem, the other would be there, always ready to offer a shoulder to lean on. It was around this time that I started noticing Robert coming home later and later. Working late again today. Yeah? You think I shouldn't work or something? Even after getting married, Robert held on to his dream of becoming a voice actor. While studying for that career, he couldn't quite see the results and had to work part-time jobs to make ends meet. Yet all the money Robert made from his part-time jobs went straight to his voice acting classes, so I had to cover all our living expenses. That's why we couldn't really save up a shared savings. After a while of being married, I realized Robert wasn't willing to give up on his dream for the sake of our family. I kept wondering if part-timers really had to work so much overtime. Robert's daily late nights added to my worries. Hey, haven't you been working too much lately? They shouldn't be making you do so much overtime, even if it's just a part-time job. I told you, I'm fine. More money is always better. Just keep your opinions to yourself. By that time, Robert had stopped calling me by my name and just referred to me as you. When we got married, I genuinely believed he would speak to me more gently and frequently, but after our marriage, I ended up hearing harsh words from him most of the time. The once gentle and deep voice of Robert had turned solely into a harsh one. He seemed to be drinking a lot, and sometimes his voice became raspy. Voice acting depends heavily on a healthy throat, so it worried me that Robert, who wanted to be a voice actor, wasn't taking care of his. But even that seemed to bother him. Slowly, he began to avoid talking to me, and eventually, he would ignore me even when we crossed paths at home. That's when I got a call from Ashley. She said she had something to discuss, so I suggested we meet up since I had my own concerns. We decided to chat in a karaoke booth so that no one could overhear us. Ashley seemed very cautious and had specifically reserved a room where she could see the counter and staff from the door. You specifically chose this room? Yes, I wanted a spot where the staff could see if there was a suspicious person outside our door. A suspicious person? Is that related to what you wanted to discuss? At my words, Ashley nodded. She had felt like someone was following her ever since she left her job about a month ago. Now she even felt followed on her days off. The reason Ashley had chosen a room where the staff could easily see was that she thought the person stalking her might try to eavesdrop on our conversation. Did you talk to the police about it? I tried, but since there's no actual contact, they can't do much. What about your boyfriend? He's coming back in a month. I thought I'd discuss it with him too, but I wanted to talk to you first. Someone close by. I see. Ashley hadn't gotten a good look at her stalker because she was too scared, so she didn't know if it was a man or a woman. So I decided to stand at a distance and identify the person who was stalking Ashley, and through that, I came to understand who it was. Although I couldn't discuss my rocky relationship with Robert in retrospect, maybe it was for the best, because the one following my best friend Ashley was none other than my husband Robert. He would tell me he had to work overtime daily, but after finishing his shift, he would lurk near Ashley's workplace and tail her when she left. I couldn't believe that the person scaring Ashley was someone so close to me. When I found out, I was beside myself. The look on Robert's face when he was following Ashley was downright creepy. He had this sleazy, unsettling grin. I fell in love and married this man. The instant I saw his face, the love that had lasted for years went cold. I told Ashley the truth and advised her to move immediately. With the help of her coworkers, she managed to have someone drive her close to her new place from the underground company parking lot for a while. After Ashley and I took these measures, Robert became increasingly frustrated, and one day, that frustration exploded. My parents are going to live here, so you should go back to your parents' house, Robert declared suddenly. I was taken aback by his words, yet Robert seemed convinced he was making perfect sense. Got a problem with that, he continued. If you oppose what I'm saying, I'm fine with divorcing you. While I had many grievances with him and even thought that divorce might not be so bad, I did think he could just kick me out of our home. I'm the one paying $1,800 for our monthly expenses. I wonder if Robert even remembers that, I said skeptically. He lost his temper. Just get out already. My parents can't move in if you're still here. Why do I have to leave? I don't get it at all, I replied, but eventually said, fine, I'll take everything I bought with me. Seeing my agreement, Robert said, just hurry up, and walked away. I immediately contacted a local buyback service. The next day, they came to our apartment. At first, Robert smirked, thinking I was moving out. However, when he saw the workers assessing all the furniture and appliances, his eyes widened in shock. After they had finished evaluating everything except what was in Robert's room, a staff member handed me a quote saying, the total value is $22,000. I promptly signed, saying, all right, sell it all. Robert, coming back to his senses, grabbed my arm with concern. Why are you selling everything? My parents are going to live here. How can they with no furniture? I shook off his grip. What are you talking about? When we got married, you said you were broke because you were paying for your acting classes. You begged me to handle the rent, furniture, and living expenses. I never imagined you were that broke. I felt deceived. Remember the $1,800 monthly expenses I've been covering. From now on, you'll pay that. And with your parents moving in, I bet it'll be even more, I declared. Robert went pale, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. Thought you could talk about money and I'd cancel the divorce? Who do you think you are? I've already gotten close to a rich lady, he continued. And then I remembered Robert following Ashley recently, if what he considers close was his stalker behavior. Then Robert seriously diluted. Ashley definitely comes from a wealthy family. Her grandfather was a businessman, and now her father has taken over. Ashley truly is the perfect heiress, but she doesn't flaunt it. She spends just like me and our friends, and no one judges her based on her family's wealth. However, Robert seemed to have learned about my best friend Ashley's wealthy background and decided she'd be a better match. Could he possibly think that if two people are the same age, the wealthier one is better? That infuriates me, but Ashley would never marry Robert. Ashley's boyfriend, whom she's been dating since high school, is coming back to the States soon. They'll likely get married, she mentioned, feeling really creeped out because someone was stalking her every day. I remarked upon hearing he wasn't close with Ashley and that she found him creepy. Robert was floored. I always escorted Ashley home, he insisted. You're lucky you weren't reported to the cops, I shot back, but I didn't know about any boyfriend. He's been abroad. She chose me over some unknown guy. They've been pen pals since elementary school and apparently talk almost daily. And unlike you, who's only been working part-time jobs, her boyfriend is a successful man recognized even by her father. Robert looked utterly defeated as I spoke. When the buyback workers had taken all the furniture and appliances, he seemed to recover somewhat. If you are all I have, you'll support my dream of becoming a voice actor forever, right? He asked, striking a pose. I gave him a cold look and said, excuse me, I've already been to the divorce lawyer's office and started the process. Let's communicate through our attorneys from now on. Robert, perhaps thinking I still had feelings for him, clung to my waist. Don't say things like that. Haven't we been getting along all this time? Getting along? When? Ever since you found out my best friend Ashley is a wealthy heiress, you've been cold to me and started hanging around her. Right after I married you. I realized it was a mistake. Robert started crying like a child, even though he's 5 years older than me. Seeing him cry like that only made my already dwindling affection for him drop even further. At this point, I couldn't stand being in the same room with him. Just cut it out. Oh, by the way, I told your uncle who's letting us rent this apartment about our divorce. My uncle? You know he's strict, right? Well, I've been paying all the rent and living expenses until now. So when I told him you might not be able to afford it if I leave, he said he'd make you work for him. That means I won't be able to continue my voice acting studies. You hardly ever practice anyways. Maybe it's time to face reality. Anyway, if you come near Ashley again, I'll report you to the police immediately. Goodbye. I left the house, determined to never look back. I plan to return to my parents' house for now, but I'm thinking of moving closer to my job if I find a good place. As for Robert, it seems his uncle kept his word and made Robert work at his company. Soon after, Robert's parents, who had been planning to leech off their son after he married the wealthy heiress, also moved into the apartment. They too were taken to work at the uncle's company. Seems like the whole family had a habit of taking advantage of others. I'm just glad I was able to get away from such a toxic family. Age difference doesn't really matter, but I think I need to choose my next partner more carefully. On another note, after things with Robert settled, I received a wedding invitation from Ashley herself. She introduced me to her longtime boyfriend, and I truly wish them all the best. My first marriage didn't work out, but I hope Ashley's marriage will last for many years to come.
I never thought I'd be starting over at 35, but here I am, Dr. Tessa Thompson, dentist and soon-to-be business owner. It's been 3 years since I married Mike, a mechanical engineer, 5 years my senior. We live in my apartment. He says he left his to his ex-wife after their divorce. I don't know much about that part of his life, and I've never pushed. Our life together has been good, for the most part. I make a comfortable living as a dentist, but I've always dreamed of more. That's why I've been squirreling away every extra penny, denying myself little luxuries. My goal? Opening my own private practice. You should do it, Tessa, Mike said one evening as we sat on our worn couch, the TV droning in the background. You'd be great at running your own business. I looked at him, surprised by his enthusiasm. You really think so? He nodded, taking a swig of his beer. Absolutely. My wife, the business owner. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? I couldn't help but smile. It did sound nice. It'll be a lot of work, I warned him. And money. We'll have to tighten our belts for a while. Mike waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about that. We'll make it work. I'll support us for the first year while you get things up and running. You just focus on making your dream come true. His words filled me with warmth. This was why I loved him, his unwavering support, his belief in me. Okay, I said, my mind already racing with plans. Let's do this. The next few months were a whirlwind. I quit my job at the clinic, throwing myself headfirst into preparations. There was so much to do, getting licenses, finding the right location, renovations, equipment. Every day brought new challenges, new decisions to make. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of preparation, my office was ready. I stood in the doorway, taking in the gleaming equipment, the fresh paint smell, the neatly arranged waiting area. This was mine. All mine. As I locked up that first night, a mix of excitement and terror churned in my stomach. Tomorrow, I'd open my doors to my first patients. I was on my own now, sink or swim. The first few months of running my own dental practice were a whirlwind. I worked 7 days a week, from dawn till dusk, barely stopping to eat or sleep. My office became my second home, scratch that, my first home. I saw more of my dental chair than I did of my own bed. Dr. Thompson, your next patient is ready, my receptionist, Lisa, would say, poking her head into my office. I'd nod, gulping down the last of my cold coffee. Thanks, Lisa. Send them in. And so it went, day after day. Fillings, crowns, root canals, I did it all. When I wasn't with patients, I was buried in paperwork, learning the ins and outs of running a business. It was exhausting, but exhilarating too. This was my dream, after all. Mike and I became like ships passing in the night. When I left for work, he was still asleep. When I got home, he was already in bed. We communicated through hastily scribbled notes and brief text messages. How's work? I texted one day, during a rare quiet moment. Fine, came the reply, hours later. I frowned at my phone. That was it? Just fine? But before I could dwell on it, Lisa was calling me for another patient, and thoughts of Mike were pushed to the back of my mind. Weeks turned into months. I was so focused on my practice that I barely noticed the changing seasons. Spring became summer, summer faded into fall. I was making progress, slowly but surely. My patient list was growing, and I was starting to see some regulars. "You're doing great, Dr. Thompson," Mr. Johnson, one of my first patients, said during a checkup. "This place is really coming along." I beamed at him. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That means a lot." But for every high, there was a low. The stress was constant, the pressure immense. There were nights I'd come home and cry, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I'd think of how far I'd come, how much I'd invested, and I'd pull myself together. I couldn't give up now. One particularly grueling day, I stumbled home well past midnight. The apartment was dark and quiet. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, too tired to make it to the bedroom. That's when my phone rang. I groaned, fumbling for it in the dark. Who could be calling at this hour? "Tessa, is that you?" It was Mike's mother, Ellen, her voice tight with worry. I sat up, suddenly alert. "Yes, it's me. What's wrong?" "I've been trying to reach Mike all day," Ellen said. "He's not answering his phone. I'm worried sick. There's been some kind of scandal at his work." My heart dropped. "Scandal? What scandal?" "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about this," I said, my mind racing. "I haven't really talked to Mike in a while." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," Mike's mother said, her voice small. "I see. Well, if you hear from him, please ask him to call me." "Of course," I promised. "I'll talk to him as soon as I can." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, my exhaustion forgotten. What was going on with Mike? How could there be a scandal at his work that I knew nothing about? I found Mike in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, despite the turmoil inside me. "Your mom called. She said there was some kind of scandal at your work." "What's going on, Mike?" He let out a long, shaky breath. "I quit my job, Tessa. About a month ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. "A month? You've been unemployed for a month and you didn't tell me?" "I didn't want to upset you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been so busy with the practice, I didn't want to add to your stress." I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to process this information. "So what happened?" "Your mom mentioned a scandal." Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was uncomfortable. "I had a fight with my boss. He was being unreasonable, demanding more and more overtime without compensation. I stood up to him, things got heated, and I walked out. My pride wouldn't let me stay. I wanted to yell, to shake him, to demand why he thought his pride was more important than our financial stability. But looking at him, slumped and defeated, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I sat back down beside him. "What are you going to do now?" I asked softly. Mike shrugged. "I don't know. I think I might be suffering from burnout. I've been thinking about seeing a psychologist, maybe taking a short break from work to figure things out." Part of me wanted to scream that we couldn't afford a break, that I was already working myself to the bone trying to keep my new practice afloat. But I swallowed those words. Mike needed support, not criticism. "Okay," I said, taking his hand. "If that's what you need, we'll make it work. But Mike, you have to promise me something. No more secrets. I need to know what's going on in your life, good or bad. Okay?" Mike nodded, squeezing my hand. "Okay, I promise." "I'm sorry, Tessa. I should have told you sooner." The next day, I called the clinic where I used to work and asked if they had any part-time positions available. It was a step backward, but we needed the extra income. As I hung up the phone, having secured the part-time position, I looked at Mike. He was on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. "I got the job," I said. "I start next week." He just nodded in response, as if it was something that was taken for granted. The next few months were a blur of exhaustion and stress. I'd wake up at dawn, see patients at my office until early afternoon, then rush to the clinic for my part-time shift. By the time I got home each night, I was dead on my feet. Mike, true to his word, started seeing a psychologist. He talked about burnout and needing time to recuperate. I tried to be supportive, but it was hard not to feel resentful as I watched him lounging on the couch while I worked myself to the bone. One evening, about 3 months after Mike had quit his job, I came home to find him in an unusually good mood. "Tessa," he exclaimed as I trudged through the door. "I've got great news. I got a job. It's with that engineering firm downtown. I start next week." Relief washed over me. Finally, things were looking up. "That's wonderful, Mike," I said, managing a tired smile. "We should celebrate." And celebrate we did. I splurged on a bottle of wine, and for the first time in months, we sat down to a meal together, talking and laughing like we used to. It felt good, like maybe we were getting back on track. But my relief was short-lived. A month into his new job, Mike came home fuming. "I quit," he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. I froze, the plate I was washing slipping from my hands and clattering into the sink. "What? Why?" "The boss is a tyrant," Mike spat. "He wants complete control over everything. I'm not some puppet he can order around." "So what now?" I asked when he finally paused for breath. He shrugged. "I'll find something else. Something better. A job where they appreciate my skills and give me the freedom I deserve." I wanted to scream. To shake him and ask if he appreciated my skills, if he understood the freedom I'd given up to keep us afloat. But I didn't. I just nodded, turned back to the dishes, and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. The weeks that followed were tense. Mike spent his days at home, supposedly job hunting, while I continued my grueling schedule. But more and more often, I'd come home to find him playing video games or watching TV. "Any luck with the job search?" I'd ask. "Nothing suitable yet," he'd reply, not looking away from the screen. "These companies just don't get it. I need something challenging, you know? With good pay and flexible hours." Then one day, Mike started talking about having children. "Wouldn't it be great to have a little one running around?" he said over breakfast. "I could stay home and take care of the kid while you work. It's the perfect solution." I stared at him, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. "Mike, we can barely afford our current lifestyle. How could we possibly support a child?" He waved his hand dismissively. "We'll figure it out. You're doing great with your practice, and I'll find something eventually. Come on, Tessa, don't you want to be a mom?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course I wanted children, someday. But not like this. Not when our marriage was hanging by a thread and our financial situation was so precarious. "I think we need to focus on getting our lives in order first," I said carefully. "Maybe when things are more stable." Mike's face fell. "You just don't understand," he muttered. "You're always so focused on work, you can't see what's really important." His words stung, but I didn't have the energy to argue. I just got up, rinsed my mug, and headed out to another long day of work. As the months dragged on, the tension in our household grew thicker. Mike's job search had become sporadic at best, and he spent more and more time immersed in his video games. I was exhausted, stressed, and increasingly resentful. One evening, I came home to find Mike excitedly setting up a new gaming console. "What's this?" I asked, my voice tight. He grinned, not noticing my tone. "Just got the latest system. The graphics are incredible." I felt my temper flare. "And how exactly did you pay for this?" Mike's smile faltered. I took some money from our joint account. But don't worry, it's an investment in my hobby." Once I start working again, I'll pay it all back. The argument that followed was ugly. Months of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. We said things we couldn't take back, reopened old wounds, and created new ones. From that day on, I stopped putting money into our joint account. I paid the bills myself and bought groceries as needed. Mike was furious, accusing me of not respecting him and infringing on his rights. "I'm the man of this house," he yelled during one particularly heated argument. "I should be managing our finances." I laughed bitterly. "What finances, Mike? The money I earned that you spend on games and beer?" The atmosphere at home became unbearable. We barely spoke, and when we did, it usually ended in an argument. I threw myself into my work even more, using it as an escape from the disaster my personal life had become. Then came the day that changed everything. I was at home, catching up on some paperwork, when I overheard Mike on the phone with his parents. His voice drifted from the bedroom, animated in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Yeah, I need a new business suit for this job interview," he was saying. "It's a great opportunity, but I'm a little short on cash right now. Could you maybe help me out?" I felt a spark of hope. Was Mike finally taking his job search seriously? But as I listened, that hope quickly turned to ash. "Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it. I'll pay you back as soon as I get the job." The call ended, and I waited, expecting Mike to come share the news about his interview. But he didn't. Instead, I heard the familiar sounds of him booting up his computer. Curious and increasingly suspicious, I quietly made my way to the bedroom door. What I saw made my blood run cold. Mike was online, not browsing job listings, but purchasing a new computer game and ordering a case of beer for delivery. I couldn't believe my eyes. He had just lied to his parents, begged them for money under false pretenses, and now he was spending it on alcohol and games? "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, pushing the door open. Mike jumped, guilt flashing across his face, before quickly being replaced by defiance. "It's none of your business. This is my money." "Your money?" I was incredulous. "You just lied to your parents to get that money. They think you're buying a suit for a job interview." The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Finally, red-faced and shaking with anger, Mike grabbed a bag and started throwing clothes into it. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice hoarse from yelling. "To my parents," he spat. "At least they support me." As the door slammed behind him, I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a mix of anger, disappointment, and an odd sense of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. Days passed since Mike stormed out, and the apartment felt eerily quiet without him. On the fourth day, as I was finishing up with a patient, my phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Hey, Tessa." Mike's voice was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "I'm in Miami with my parents. Mom's always wanted to come here, so we decided to make a weekend of it." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "And how exactly are you paying for this trip?" There was a brief pause before Mike answered, his tone slightly less jovial. "Well, I had to borrow a couple of your credit cards. But don't worry. I'll pay you back many times over once I start this new job." I felt sick. "You took my credit cards without asking me?" "Come on, don't be like that," Mike said, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I'd grown to hate. "It's just for the weekend. I'll bring you back a nice shell from the beach, okay? Have a good weekend, honey." Before I could respond, he had hung up. In that moment, something inside me snapped. With shaking hands, I opened my banking app and blocked all my credit cards. Next, I called a locksmith. Within an hour, he was at my apartment, changing the locks. My final stop that day was a lawyer's office. I'd found her online, Sandra Patel, specializing in divorce law. "I want to file for divorce," I said, the words coming out easier than I'd expected. Sandra nodded, her expression compassionate but professional. I understand, Dr. Thompson. We'll start the process right away. Can you tell me a bit more about your situation? By the time I left her office, the divorce papers were being drawn up. As I stepped out onto the street, the late afternoon sun warming my face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The sun had long set when my phone rang again. Mike's name flashed on the screen, and I braced myself as I answered. Tessa? Thank God you picked up. Mike's voice was frantic. Something's wrong with the credit cards. They're not working, and we can't pay for anything here. Mom and Dad are freaking out. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. That's because I blocked them, Mike. I didn't give you permission to use my cards. There was stunned silence for a moment before Mike spoke again. Look, I'm sorry, okay? His tone shifted to pleading. We're already here on the coast. Can't you just unblock the cards? We'll sort everything out when we get back, I promise. I almost laughed at the familiarity of those empty promises. No, Mike. I'm done sorting things out for you. You put me in impossible situations time and time again. Now you can figure this one out on your own. Tessa, please. He was begging now. You're putting me in such an awkward position. My parents are here, we have no way to pay, this is your problem too. No, Mike, I said firmly. This is your problem. You created it, now you solve it. Goodbye. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I spent the morning packing up Mike's belongings, trying not to get caught up in memories as I boxed up his clothes, books, and the various gadgets he'd accumulated over the years. Once everything was packed, I called a storage facility and arranged for his things to be kept there. A few days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a call from Mike. I stepped out of my office to take it. Tessa? I'm outside the apartment, but my key isn't working. Did you change the locks? He sounded incredulous. Yes, I did, I replied calmly. Mike, I've sent divorce papers to your parents' address. You should be receiving them soon. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Divorce papers? Tessa, you can't be serious. We can work this out, we always do. Not this time, I said, surprised at how steady my voice was. I packed up your things and sent them to a storage facility. I'll text you the details. Tessa, please, he begged. Let's start over. I'll change, I promise. Just give me one more chance. I closed my eyes, memories of all the last chances flashing through my mind. No, Mike. It's over. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for the end of what we once had, relief that it was finally over, and a growing excitement for what the future might hold. For the first time in years, that future was entirely up to me. A few weeks after I'd sent Mike's belongings to storage, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Tessa? It's Ellen, Mike's mother. I braced myself, expecting a tirade about ruining their Miami trip. But Ellen's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I owe you an apology, Tessa, she said, catching me off guard. I had no idea what Mike has been putting you through. As Ellen spoke, the pieces of Mike's past began to fall into place. She told me about Mike's first wife, how she'd left him due to his chronic irresponsibility. Ellen had hoped Mike had changed, that our marriage would be different. When we got back from Miami and I learned the truth, how he'd been lying to you, stealing your money, I was devastated, Ellen confessed. I kicked him out of the house. I couldn't enable his behavior anymore. I felt a wave of empathy for this woman who'd raised Mike, who'd hoped for the best for her son. It's not your fault, Ellen, I said softly. You didn't know. Still, I'm so sorry for what he's put you through, she replied. You didn't deserve any of it. After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing the conversation. It was oddly comforting to know that I wasn't alone in being disappointed by Mike. In the weeks that followed, Mike made several attempts to reconcile. He showed up at my office, flowers in hand, pleading for another chance. He waited outside my apartment, trying to catch me as I came home. Each time, I refused to engage. I knew now that he wouldn't change, that we'd end up in the same cycle if I let him back in. As time passed, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. Without Mike's expenses draining our accounts, I was able to focus fully on my practice. I left the part-time clinic job, pouring all my energy into my own office. I hired a marketing consultant, and soon my patient list was growing steadily. 6 months after filing for divorce, I hired 2 more dentists to help with the increased workload. It was a joy to see my little practice flourishing, to know that all my hard work was finally paying off. A year after Mike left, I made the final payment on my business loan. To celebrate, I booked a weekend trip to a nearby spa resort. Something I'd always wanted to do but had never allowed myself to splurge on before. As I lounged by the pool, sipping a fruity cocktail, I marveled at how much my life had changed. Now, as I sit in my expanded office, looking over plans for a new wing to accommodate more specialists, I can't help but feel proud of how far I've come. The past 2 years have been a journey of self-discovery and growth. I've learned to value myself, to trust my instincts, and to never settle for less than I deserve. Who knows what the future might bring? For now, I'm content knowing that whatever comes next, I have the strength and wisdom to handle it. My story isn't over. In many ways, it feels like it's just beginning. I remember the day I met him like it was yesterday. College was buzzing with the start of a new semester, and there I was, an eager young thing with a sketchbook under my arm, dreaming of becoming a top-notch designer. Then there was him, Jake, all charm and big dreams, talking loudly about changing the world one election at a time. We clicked instantly, 2 ambitious souls, not a care in the world except our future. "Hey, you're in my intro to design class, right?" he had asked me, his grin wide as he caught up to me on the campus walkway. "Yeah, that's me," trying to make sense of it all, I shot back, a playful edge to my voice. "Jake, and I get it. But hey, if you ever need a study buddy or someone to run ideas by, I'm your guy." His confidence was something else, almost enough to make you forget he was just a student like me. From then on, it was us against the world. Nights spent over coffee and textbooks, him rambling about political theories while I doodled in the margins of my notes. We were a team, and nothing felt impossible. "I'm telling you, Anita, we're gonna make it big. You'll be designing national galleries, and I'll be right there, maybe as governor, making sure the arts get the funding they deserve," he'd declare on those long nights, his eyes shining with a mixture of ambition and naivety. "And what about kids? White picket fence?" I'd tease, watching his face. He'd wave a dismissive hand. "Nah, not for us. We've got bigger plans. Who needs a fence when you can have the whole city?" It was all very romantic, in a youthful, dream big kind of way. We married before graduation, a small ceremony with just a few friends and family. It felt right, like we were setting off on an adventure together, not just tying the knot. As newlyweds, we were unstoppable. Jake quickly moved up from an assistant to the governor's aide to the head of the Department of Parks and Recreation. It seemed every month brought a new accolade or a step up the career ladder for him. He was a natural, shaking hands and kissing babies, always in the spotlight. At home, it was different. "How was your day?" became our routine conversation starter. "Busy as hell. Meetings back to back." "What about you, babe? How's the design world treating you?" I'd shrug, keeping it light. "Oh, you know, just another day of picking colors and convincing clients I know best." He'd laugh, but his eyes were often distant, mine still at work. I didn't mind, I understood. We were both hustling, after all. One evening, I came home, my mind buzzing from clinching a major deal that would put our department at the forefront of the industry. I was tired, my shoulders aching from the weight of my laptop bag and the day's stresses. Jake was already home, something that had become rarer these days. I clinched the Johnson account. The presentation went off without a hitch, I announced, hoping to share a piece of my day, looking for a flicker of shared excitement. "That's nice, babe," Jake said, not looking up from his papers scattered around the living room. "Listen, since you had a lighter day, could you fix dinner? I'm swamped. Meetings back to back, and I barely had lunch." I paused at the doorway, my coat half off, the words "lighter day" echoing in my head. Lighter day, Jake? It was an 8-hour showdown to secure a deal that boosts our entire fiscal year. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a shrug. "Yeah, but it's not like you're out there in the trenches, right? It's all just picking colors and convincing people to like your ideas." The dismissive tone stung more than I expected. "It's a bit more than that, Jake. This was a big win for us." Sure, he muttered, turning back to his papers. "But really, can you handle dinner? I'm beat." The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth as I headed to the kitchen, my triumph overshadowed by his offhand remarks. Weeks passed, and the pattern continued. I was making strides at work, each step up the ladder marked by an increase in responsibility and income. The day I found out my salary had surpassed Jake's was a day of mixed feelings. I wanted to share it with him, but I hesitated, knowing his current state of mind. Finally, one night at dinner, I broached the topic, trying to keep it light. "You know, with the new accounts I brought in, it looks like I might be out-earning you this year." "Funny, huh?" Jake put down his fork, his expression unreadable. "Really? That's how you're going to bring it up?" I frowned, puzzled by his tone. "Bring what up, Jake? It's good news. It means we're doing well, both of us. It's not we, Anita. It's you. And now I need to find a way to step up. I can't have people thinking I can't provide." I reached across the table, trying to bridge the gap his words had created. "Jake, it's not a competition. It's our money, for our future." He pulled his hand back, shaking his head. "It's not that simple. You don't get it. This is important to me." His words felt like a slap, dismissing not just my efforts, but our partnership. "I thought we were in this together, Jake. When did it become just about you?" Since I started being the one left behind, he shot back, his voice rising. "You're there with your fancy deals and now out-earning me? What does that make me?" "It makes you my husband," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Not my competitor." Jake scoffed, standing up abruptly. "I need to think about this. Maybe look into other options, something that pays better." I watched him go, feeling the chasm widen. It wasn't just about money or success. It was about respect, understanding, and support, things that were becoming rarer in our conversations. That night, I lay in bed, turning over the day's conversation. It felt like we were worlds apart, living under the same roof, but walking different paths. I knew something had to give, but at that moment, I wasn't sure what or how. What I did know was that I couldn't let his insecurities dictate my success or our happiness. But fixing that was a puzzle I hadn't figured out yet. 15 years into our marriage, our life was a testament to outward success, a beautiful house, shiny cars, properties here and there, and bank accounts that would make anyone envious. But not everything that glitters is gold, and for Jake, it seemed the sheen was definitely starting to tarnish. He had been with the Natural Resources Agency for a good while, but his career was like a car stuck in mud, spinning its wheels but going nowhere. I'd listened to him rant after another long, liquor-tinged evening. "It's all rigged, Anita. The jobs I deserve are going to guys who can't tell a policy from a pancake. It's all about who you know, or who you, well, you know," he'd grumble, tipping back another drink. I tried to offer solutions, not just a sympathetic ear. "Have you thought about seeing someone? A therapist could help," I suggested one night as I cleared the dinner dishes, his glass needing a refill. Jake slammed his fist down on the table, making the cutlery jump. "I don't need a shrink, Anita. The problem isn't in my head. It's in the corruption and cronyism I have to deal with every day. But maybe talking to someone could help you cope better, or even strategize how to get around those obstacles." I persisted, feeling the weight of his frustration as my own. Just drop it, will you? I know my job. What I need is for the system to change, not my mindset. His anger was a wall I couldn't penetrate, no matter how I tried. So, I focused on what I could control, my own career. I was making waves, leading my team in international exhibitions, my designs becoming the face of major contracts. My opinion mattered at work, I was respected, and it felt damn good. But as I flourished, Jake recoiled even more. He stopped accompanying me to any work events, especially the big, glitzy ones where my achievements were front and center. Why don't you come to the gala tomorrow night? I asked him one evening, trying to keep my tone light. It would mean a lot to me. Plus, the CEO will be there, you could make some connections. Jake looked up from his laptop, his face set in a stubborn line. And what? Stand around while everyone congratulates you? I'm pretty sure they just see me as Mr. Anita these days. That's not true, I countered, feeling a pang in my heart. You're my husband, Jake. You're your own person, and they respect that. He scoffed, closing his laptop with a snap. Right, Anita. To them, I'm just the guy who carries your purse. No thanks. I've got better things to do. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I was proud of what I'd achieved, but I wanted my partner by my side, sharing in the success, not resenting it. The next day, as I put on my evening dress, looking in the mirror, I felt a mix of excitement and sadness. My reflection showed a woman who had everything she'd ever wanted professionally, but personally, there was a gaping hole where her husband's support should be. I went alone, as I had started to do more often. The gala was a blur of congratulations, handshakes, and bright smiles. I accepted the accolades and spoke about my latest designs, but each time I saw a couple together, laughing or sharing a quiet moment, my heart ached. Returning home, I found Jake on the couch, a bottle in hand, not even pretending to have waited up. The clock was ticking past 9 p.m. as I rushed out of the conference room, my phone dead from the day's back-to-back meetings. My mind was racing with the discussions we'd had, but a nagging thought about Jake waiting at home made my heart race faster. We hadn't spoken since the morning, and I knew he'd be wondering where I was. I drove home as quickly as I could, rehearsing an apology in my mind. But when I walked through the front door, the cold look in Jake's eyes told me no apology would suffice tonight. You're late, he stated flatly, his voice edged with accusation as he sat in the dimly lit living room. I'm sorry, Jake. The meeting ran over, and my phone died. I didn't get a chance to call. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, my voice weary. Meeting, huh? Or should I say your little party with the bosses? His words were sharp, his eyes narrowing. I was taken aback. What are you talking about? It was just a regular business meeting, Jake. Sure it was. I bet it's all those late nights with them that got you where you are. Not your talent, just playing up to the bosses. His voice was bitter, and he took a swig from the bottle next to him. My cheeks flushed with anger and disbelief. You think I got my promotions by, what? Sleeping around? How can you even say that? He laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. Oh, come on, Anita. It's obvious. Why else would they promote you, a woman, over others? The accusation stung, and I felt a mix of hurt and fury. I earned my position with hard work and talent. It's disgusting that you'd think so low of me. Jake stood up abruptly, his body swaying slightly. You're never here, always working, leaving me alone. And we don't even have kids, because you're too busy with your career. His words were like slaps, each one hitting hard. I can't believe you're blaming me for no kids. We agreed on this, Jake. And my career is not an excuse for your unhappiness or failures. He stepped closer, his voice rising. My failures? No, Anita, they're because I married someone who cares more about her job than her husband. You've ruined everything. I tried to keep my voice calm. Jake, this isn't us. We're both upset. Maybe we should talk about this in the morning when you're sober. No, I'm done. I need to be alone. He grabbed his keys and headed toward the door. Jake, wait. But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him. I tried calling him several times, but it went straight to voicemail. Alone in the house, I wandered from room to room, each one echoing with the ghost of earlier, happier times. I couldn't sleep, the couch cold and unwelcoming, his accusations replaying in my mind. The morning after Jake stormed out, I dragged myself to work. My eyes were red from a sleepless night, my mind swirling with the harsh words and the slam of the door echoing in my ears. I was on autopilot, nodding and smiling where needed, but inside, I felt like I was crumbling. Mid-morning, my boss called me into his office. I straightened my blazer and tried to compose myself, wiping away the last traces of tears. "Anita, I've got something that might interest you," he said, his tone more upbeat than I could handle at that moment. "How would you like to head our new project in Milan? It's a big opportunity, international exposure, leading a team." I thought of you immediately. Milan. Italy had always been a dream, one of those places I'd promised myself I'd visit, one way or another. Under different circumstances, I would have jumped at the chance, no second thoughts. "That sounds incredible, sir," I managed, a genuine smile breaking through the fog of my sadness. "It's actually a dream of mine to work in Milan." "Great. I knew you'd be excited. Think it over, and let me know your decision." Returning home, I found Jake sitting at the kitchen table, looking sober but somber. The air between us was thick with unsaid words. I hesitated at the doorway, then decided to breach the silence. "Jake, we need to talk. I was offered a major project today. It's in Milan," I began, watching his reaction closely. He looked up, his face hardening. "Milan, huh? And what, you're just going to go?" "It's a big deal for my career, Jake. It could change everything for us, for me. I want to take it." I tried to keep my voice steady, assertive. "Us? There's no us in this, Anita. It's always about you and your career." His voice rose, a bitter edge slicing through the quiet of the kitchen. "I'm still the same person, Jake. I'm still your wife. Why can't you see this as something good for both of us?" I pleaded, hoping for some sliver of understanding. "There is no both of us if you choose to go to Milan. It's me or the job, Anita. Decide." His ultimatum hung in the air, stark and cold. "Why do you make me choose, Jake? Why can't you be happy for me?" My voice cracked, frustration and pain bubbling up. "Because I need to know where I stand. Either you're with me, or you're there, living your dream without me." He was yelling now, his face red with anger. I took a deep breath, my mind made up, heart aching. "I choose Milan. I have to do this, Jake, not just for my career, but for myself." Jake stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. He stormed to our bedroom and came back with a stack of papers, divorce papers. Slamming them down on the table, he met my eyes with a cold finality. "Then this is it, Anita. If you go, we're done." I stared at the papers, then at him, my heart sinking. But something inside me hardened. I couldn't give up on my dreams, not even for him. The next week was a blur. I signed the papers, packed my bags, and before I knew it, I was on a plane to Milan. The city was beautiful, a picturesque postcard at every turn. I was often on TV, discussing the project, my face a mask of professionalism, hiding the turmoil inside. Despite the excitement, my thoughts drifted back to Jake, to the possibility of fixing things. But each time I picked up my phone to call, I remembered his ultimatum, and my resolve strengthened. Stepping back into the house after 2 weeks in Milan felt surreal. But there he was, Jake, sitting on the sofa as if the past month had been just a minor hiccup. "Anita, you're back. Come here," he said, rising from the couch with open arms, a forced smile plastered across his face. I approached, but kept my distance, the memories of his ultimatums and threats too fresh to allow any closer. "Jake, we can't just pretend nothing happened. You gave me an ultimatum, remember? Me or the job?" He waved a dismissive hand, his voice light. Oh, that. I was just stressed, you know? But I've had time to think, and I'm willing to start over. I'm ready to forgive you, as long as you agree to make some changes. My eyebrows shot up. Forgive me? For what, exactly? For following my career? And what changes are you talking about? Jake's expression hardened slightly. You know, Anita, quit your job, focus on us. If you'd just listen and do as I say, we could go back to how things were. It hit me then, the sheer absurdity and manipulation in his words. I felt a mix of anger and relief, anger at his audacity, and relief that I was finally seeing the manipulation for what it was. You can't be serious, Jake. You're asking me to give up everything I've worked for. You know I can't do that. He laughed, a tight, cold sound. It was worth a shot. But I thought you'd see sense. Guess I was wrong. I reached into my bag, pulling out the divorce papers, the ones he had thrown at me before I left. I signed these, Jake. I thought you were serious about the divorce. Seems I was right. His smile faltered, and he snatched the papers from my hand. This was just a joke, Anita. Can't you take a joke? A joke? I stared at him, incredulous. Threatening divorce was a joke? You're unbelievable. Jake's face turned red, his voice rising. You're making a huge mistake, Anita. You'll regret this. I won't let you just walk away and ruin everything. I'm not ruining anything. I'm saving myself, I said firmly. You've made it clear where I stand with you. It's time for me to move on. He stood, towering over me, his voice venomous. Fine. But you're not taking anything from here. This is my house, my things. You leave with nothing. I'll make sure everyone knows how you got to the top. I'll destroy you. Try it, and it'll backfire, I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. I've done nothing wrong. My conscience is clear. I went to our bedroom, packed a suitcase with essentials, some clothes, my design portfolios, personal documents. The rest didn't matter. I could replace things, but I couldn't replace peace of mind or self-respect. The morning after leaving the house, I made my way to my lawyer's office, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and plans. Walking into Mr. Carter's office, I found him looking over some papers, his glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He looked up, his expression serious. Anita, good to see you. Please, have a seat. Tell me everything. I took a deep breath and started recounting the recent events, not omitting the harsh words and threats Jake had hurled at me. And then he told me he'd make sure I wouldn't get a penny and would ruin my reputation, I concluded, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Carter's brow furrowed as he listened, jotting down notes. We need to take this seriously, Anita. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? We might find something that could help us in court. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, surprising even me. I'm ahead of you there, Mr. Carter. I hired one a few months ago, when things started to really go downhill. I didn't trust what was happening behind my back. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a folder, thick with documents and photos, and handed it to him. Everything's in here. Turns out, Jake has been more than just verbally abusive. Mr. Carter opened the folder and began to examine the contents meticulously. His expression changed from concerned to outright shocked as he sifted through the photographs and reports. Anita, this is solid evidence. He's been taking bribes for approving certain city projects. And this, he pointed at a photo, shows him with his assistant at a not-so-professional event. Yes, and she's been more than just an assistant for quite a while, I added, feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow. Mr. Carter leaned back, pressing his fingers together, looking at me over his glasses. This changes everything. We not only have a strong case for the divorce on grounds of infidelity, but possibly more. His threats against you and this evidence could sway things significantly in your favor. The days leading up to the trial were tense. Jake's calls became more frequent and desperate. He alternated between begging me to come back and cursing my name. Each voicemail, each missed call, I saved and documented. The proceedings began, and Mr. Carter was relentless. "Your Honor, we have substantial evidence here not only of Mr. Thompson's infidelity, which has devastated my client, but also of his illegal activities related to his position at the Natural Resources Agency." Jake's face went pale as Mr. Carter laid out photo after photo, document after document, all while recounting the threats he'd made against me. When it was finally Jake's turn, he tried to dismiss the claims. "These are all baseless accusations. She's trying to ruin my career because she's jealous." The judge looked over the rim of her glasses, unimpressed. "We have substantial evidence before us, Mr. Thompson. Can you explain these transactions and these photographs?" His voice faltered, his usual charm failing him under the weight of undeniable proof. I was just doing my job. Those photos are out of context." But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. After a brief deliberation, the judge spoke, her voice firm and clear. "Given the evidence presented, I am awarding Mrs. Thompson financial compensation for the distress caused by the infidelity and threats. The division of property will be equal." With the past finally behind me, I threw myself into my work with a passion that hadn't felt this raw and real in years. Before I knew it, my dedication paid off. I was offered the position of creative director. It was a dream come true, a position I had eyed for years. I was out celebrating this new chapter at a cozy little bistro downtown with my closest friend, Laura, when my phone buzzed. The screen showed Jake's name, a sight that no longer caused my heart to skip in dread. "Ugh, it's Jake," I muttered, showing Laura the phone. "Are you going to answer it?" she asked, her eyebrow raised in that all too familiar, "Are you serious?" look. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "What do you want, Jake?" "Hey, Anita. I've been thinking. I realized I made a huge mistake. Can we meet? I'd like to talk about maybe starting over." Jake's voice came through the speaker, a mix of desperation and something that sounded feebly like sincerity. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. It wasn't a joyful sound, more of a "can you believe this guy" kind of laugh. "Start over? Really, Jake? After everything?" "It's all changed, Anita. I got fired. She took everything, even the job. And now, she won't give back the gifts either. I'm left with nothing." He blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in his haste. I shook my head, still chuckling. "So, let me get this straight. You want to start over because she dumped you and took your job? That's rich, Jake. You don't understand. I've changed, Anita. I really have," he pleaded. "Jake, even if that's true, I've moved on. I'm a creative director now, and my life is full and happy without you. There's no place for you in it anymore," I said, the finality in my voice mirroring the resolve in my heart. "But Anita, I wish you the best, Jake. Goodbye." I ended the call, blocked his number, and turned off my phone. Laura was looking at me, a proud smile spreading across her face. "You really are over him, aren't you?" she said, lifting her wine glass in a toast. "Completely," I confirmed, clinking her glass with mine. "To new beginnings, and to being in charge of my own happiness." The next day, feeling empowered and in need of companionship that asked for nothing but love in return, I decided it was time to expand my little family. I went to the local shelter, where a scruffy terrier mix caught my eye. He was a little older, a bit rough around the edges, much like me. It felt right, adopting him. I named him Buddy, a friend who I knew would offer loyalty without conditions. Life was good. It was real, it was mine, and it was filled with possibilities. I had made it through the storm, and now, I was not just surviving, I was thriving. My name's Caroline, and I've been married to Mike for 5 years now. I work as a chef at a local restaurant, and I absolutely love it. Cooking's been my passion since I was a kid, and I've always dreamed of becoming a famous chef someday. Mike works as a sales manager for a small company. Our life together was pretty good, for the most part. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we managed to make it work. The only real thorn in my side was Mike's mother, Linda. She's a social worker, specializing in child safety assessments for the local administration. And let me tell you, she's a piece of work. From day one, Linda made it clear she didn't like me. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. She'd always find something to criticize, whether it was my cooking, my appearance, or just the way I breathed. It was exhausting. The worst part was that Mike never stood up for me. He'd just sit there, silent, while his mother tore me apart. One day, I decided to confront Mike about his relationship with his mother. We were sitting in our living room after dinner, the TV droning on in the background. "Mike," I started, trying to keep my voice calm, "don't you think your mom's a bit harsh sometimes?" Mike's face hardened. "Look, Caroline, you don't understand. Mom's always been like this. She raised me and my brother on her own after Dad left. She had to be tough. But..." He cut me off. "She used to tell us that if we misbehaved, she'd give us away to other parents. It scared the hell out of us, but it worked. We learned to behave." I stared at him, shocked. That's terrible, Mike. You know that's not normal, right?" He shrugged. "It's just how things were. Mom did her best." I realized then that this was a battle I couldn't win. Mike was too deeply under his mother's influence. Years of manipulation and fear had left their mark. As if dealing with Linda wasn't bad enough, there was also the constant comparison to Sarah, my sister-in-law. Sarah was married to Mike's older brother, Tom. In Linda's eyes, Sarah could do no wrong. She was the perfect daughter-in-law, smart, talented, beautiful, and well-mannered. Everything I apparently wasn't. "Oh, Caroline," Linda would say during our family dinners, "did you hear about Sarah's latest achievement at work? She got another promotion. Isn't that wonderful?" I'd nod and smile, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations." Sarah would beam, basking in the praise. "Thank you, Caroline. It's not much, really." But the worst part of these dinners wasn't the comparisons. It was the constant badgering about children. Linda was obsessed with the idea of grandchildren, and she made it her mission to remind me of my duty at every opportunity. "So, Caroline," she'd start, her eyes narrowing, "when are you and Mike planning on starting a family? You're not getting any younger, you know." I'd take a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "We're focusing on our careers right now, Linda. Children will come when we're ready." Linda would scoff. "Career? Cooking isn't a career, dear. It's a hobby. A real woman knows her place is in the home, raising children." I'd feel my blood boil, but I'd bite my tongue. Getting into an argument wouldn't change anything. Mike, as usual, would stay silent, pushing food around his plate. Interestingly, Linda never bothered Sarah about having children. I found out why one day when Mike let it slip that Tom was infertile. It was a family secret, one that Linda guarded fiercely. She'd rather have no grandchildren than admit her precious firstborn had any flaws. Over time, Linda tightened her grip on her sons, insisting they help her with everything. And of course, that expectation extended to the daughters-in-law as well. Tom and Sarah lived nearby, so it was easier for them to cater to Linda's whims. But Mike and I lived further away and both worked late hours. We couldn't visit as often as Linda wanted, and boy, did she let us know how unhappy she was about it. "I might as well be dead for all you two care," she'd say dramatically over the phone. My own son and his wife, too busy to visit their poor, widowed mother. I'd roll my eyes, mouthing the words along with her. I'd heard this speech so many times I could recite it in my sleep. "We're sorry, Linda," I'd say, not feeling sorry at all. "We'll try to visit more often." But it was never enough. In Linda's world, we should be at her beck and call 24/7. And of course, it was all my fault. I was the one bossing Mike around and keeping him from his familial duties. As the months went by, I threw myself into my work even more. The kitchen became my sanctuary, the only place where I felt truly valued and respected. Chef Paolo continued to mentor me, pushing me to expand my skills and creativity. "You have a gift, Caroline," he'd say, tasting my latest creation. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were a balm to my battered self-esteem. In the kitchen, I wasn't the disappointing daughter-in-law or the wife who couldn't give her husband children. I was just Caroline, the talented chef with a bright future ahead of her. The day everything started to unravel began like any other. I was at work, up to my elbows in prep for the dinner rush, when my phone buzzed. It was Linda. I groaned internally, but answered anyway. "Hello, Linda. What can I do for you?" Her voice came through, sharp and demanding. "Caroline, I need you to come to the mall and pick me up. Sarah and I have been shopping, and we have too many bags for a taxi." I glanced at the clock. It was peak traffic time, and the mall was on the other side of town. "Linda, I'm at work. I can't just leave." "Oh, so your job is more important than family?" she interrupted. "I see how it is. I suppose I'll just have to struggle with all these bags myself. At my age, I could throw my back out, but don't you worry about that." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "Fine, Linda. I'll be there as soon as I can." The traffic was a nightmare. I sat in gridlock for over an hour, my frustration mounting with each passing minute. By the time I finally reached the mall, I was a ball of stress and irritation. I circled the parking lot, looking for Linda and Sarah. They were nowhere to be seen. I called Linda's phone. No answer. I tried Sarah. Nothing. Finally, after my third attempt, Linda picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. "Oh, Caroline," Linda said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We got tired of waiting, so we took a taxi home. I thought Sarah texted you." Before I could protest, she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone in disbelief. Then I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, letting out all the frustration and anger I'd been bottling up for years. When I got home, Mike was already there. I stormed in, still seething from the day's events. "Your mother," I started, but Mike cut me off. I know. Mom told me what happened." "Why didn't you get there faster?" "She had to take a taxi, because of you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "Are you kidding me right now? I left work early, sat in traffic for hours, and it's my fault?" Mike shrugged. "You know how Mom is with waiting. You should have planned better." The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and tense silences at home. Mike and I were barely speaking, the rift between us growing wider with each passing day. Then, one evening as I was closing up the kitchen, my phone rang. It was Linda again. I considered ignoring it, but I knew that would only lead to more drama. With a heavy sigh, I answered. "Hello, Linda." "Caroline, dear," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I need you to do me a favor. It's Sarah's birthday tomorrow. I'm throwing her a little party at my house. I need you to deliver food from your restaurant. The most expensive dishes, mind you. For 10 people. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Linda, that's going to be extremely expensive. I can't just—" "Oh, don't be so stingy," she interrupted. "It's for family. And of course, you'll be paying for it. Consider it your gift to Sarah." I nearly dropped the phone. "You want me to pay for a gourmet meal for 10 people? Linda, that's insane. I can't afford that." She sked disapprovingly. "Well, if you're going to be difficult about it, I suppose you could always cook the meal yourself and bring it over. That's what a real chef would do, isn't it?" I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "Linda, I work full-time. I don't have the energy to cook a gourmet meal for 10 people after a full shift. I see, she said, her voice cold. Well, I'll let Mike know how little you care about his family. Goodbye, Caroline. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. When I got home, Mike was waiting for me, his face like a thundercloud. Mom called, he said without preamble. Why are you being so difficult about Sarah's birthday? Mom's right, you don't care about anyone but yourself. In the end, I caved. I couldn't face another argument, another night of cold silence. The next day, I placed the order at the restaurant, wincing as I handed over my credit card. It was a huge chunk of my savings, but what choice did I have? The following evening, Mike and I arrived at Linda's house for the party. I was exhausted from a long day at work, but I plastered on a smile as we entered. Linda greeted us at the door, all smiles for Mike and barely a glance for me. Oh, you're here. Come in, come in. Everyone's already started eating. We walked into the dining room, and I stopped short. The table was laden with food, but it wasn't the dishes I had ordered from the restaurant. Instead, there was an array of homemade dishes that looked, well, less than appetizing. What's going on? I asked, confused. Where's the food from the restaurant? Sarah looked up from her plate, smirking. Oh, didn't Mom tell you? I decided I wanted to cook for my own birthday. Isn't that right, Mom? Linda nodded, beaming at Sarah. Yes, and everything is just delicious. Sarah's such a talented cook. I stood there, speechless. Mike nudged me. Come on, let's sit down. Don't make a scene. Numbly, I took my seat. Mike chatted and laughed with everyone, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I caught Linda watching me several times, a satisfied smirk on her face. By the time we left, I was emotionally drained. In the car on the way home, I turned to Mike. Did you know about this? That Sarah was going to cook? He shrugged. Mom might have mentioned it. What's the big deal? I stared at him in disbelief. The big deal is that I spent a fortune on food that's now going to waste, Mike. And your mother knew that when she asked me to order it. You're overreacting, he said, not taking his eyes off the road. It was just a misunderstanding. But I knew better. This was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated move by Linda, another in her endless series of power plays. And once again, I was the loser. A couple of months passed, and the tension in our household had become almost unbearable. Mike and I were barely speaking, and when we did, it usually ended in an argument. I was spending more and more time at the restaurant, throwing myself into my work with a kind of desperate energy. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a long shift, Mike approached me with an unusually excited expression on his face. Caroline, he said, his eyes bright, I need your help with something important. I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. What is it? It's Mom's birthday next month, he explained, and I want to do something really special for her. Something that'll blow Tom's gift out of the water. Got any ideas? I was about to shake my head when suddenly, a thought struck me. I remembered overhearing Chef Paolo talking about an upcoming event at the restaurant. Actually, I said slowly, I might have an idea. On your mom's birthday, there's going to be a special event at the restaurant. They're filming an episode of that cooking show your mom loves. You know, the one with that presenter she's always going on about? Mike's eyes widened. No way. Are you serious? I nodded, feeling a small spark of excitement despite myself. Yeah, we could book a table for that night. If we're lucky, we might even get to be part of the filming. It's happening in the next room over from the main dining area. Mike's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Caroline, that's perfect. Mom would absolutely love that. She's always wanted to meet that presenter. For a moment, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It was nice to see Mike so happy, and for once, to be the source of that happiness. We should keep it a surprise, I suggested, getting caught up in the moment. Can you imagine her face when she realizes where she is and what's happening? Mike nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. We'll keep it completely under wraps. She won't suspect a thing. We spent the next hour planning out the details. I would book the table and arrange everything at the restaurant. Mike would handle getting Linda there without spoiling the surprise. The next day, I spoke to Chef Paolo about booking the table and explained the situation. He was more than happy to help, even offering to put us at one of the best tables in the house. The day of Linda's birthday arrived, and I woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As I was getting ready, Mike approached me with an odd expression on his face. "Hey, I think I'll go pick up Mom myself," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Why don't you head to the restaurant on your own?" "I'll meet you there with Mom." I frowned, a little taken aback. "Oh, okay. What time should I arrive?" "Just stick to the reservation time," Mike said quickly. "I'll handle everything else." I noticed Mike leaving much earlier than necessary, but I brushed it off. Maybe he had some last-minute preparations to take care of. When I arrived at the restaurant at the appointed time, my heart sank. Through the window, I could see that the dining room was already full. Our family and several guests were seated at the largest table, laughing and talking animatedly. They looked like they'd been there for quite some time. I entered, my steps faltering as I approached the table. My usual place next to Mike was occupied by one of Linda's friends. I stood there, feeling like a ghost at my own party. "Hello, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely glanced at me, continuing their conversations as if I weren't there. The only one who acknowledged me was Linda, who gave me a smug smile before turning back to her guests. I turned to Mike, confusion and hurt swirling inside me. "What's going on?" "I thought we were surprising your mother together." Mike finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Caroline, we're tired of all the drama. Mom's birthday should be a happy occasion, without any arguments or tension. We thought it would be better this way." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Better? You mean, better without me?" Before Mike could respond, Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Caroline, dear. Didn't Mike tell you? We decided to have a little family gathering. Just the people who really matter." I felt my face burning with humiliation. That's when I noticed the camera crew in the corner, filming the whole scene. Linda, oblivious to their presence, continued her tirade. "You know, it's probably for the best that you haven't given Mike any children," she said loudly. "A barren, useless woman like you shouldn't be a mother. If you ever do manage to have a child, I'll make sure it's taken away and given to Sarah. She'd be a much better mother." Sarah, Mike's sister-in-law, giggled as Linda patted her head approvingly. Linda was on a roll now, playing to her audience. "You should see some of the cases I deal with at work. Women like Caroline, thinking they can have it all, a career and a family. Huh. I take their children away and give them to real families, families with proper values." The guests nodded and murmured in agreement, shooting me mocking looks. I stood there, frozen, as Linda continued to spew her venom. I felt a deep sense of shame, not for myself, but for this woman who could be so cruel, so callous. "I'm not hungry," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Enjoy your dinner." As I turned to leave, I heard Linda's laughter, followed by the laughter of her guests. The sound followed me out of the restaurant, echoing in my ears like a twisted symphony. I arrived home, my mind still reeling from the events at the restaurant. Without thinking, I started pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them haphazardly into a suitcase. I couldn't stay here anymore, not after what had just happened. As I was frantically packing, my phone rang. It was James, the restaurant administrator. I almost didn't answer, but something in me made me pick up. "Caroline," James's voice was urgent. "You need to check the social media page for that cooking show that was filming at the restaurant today. Now." Curiosity overcame my desire to flee. I opened my laptop and found the page. What I saw made my jaw drop. There, front and center, was a video of Linda, But it wasn't the polished, put-together Linda she usually presented to the world. This was Linda in all her ugly glory, spewing venom about me, about how she abused her position to take children from their mothers. The video had hundreds of thousands of views already, and the comments section was on fire. She should be fired immediately. How can someone so cruel work with children? Poor Caroline, having to deal with such a monster of a mother-in-law. Before I knew what I was doing, I was in my car, driving back to the restaurant. I burst through the doors, my heart pounding. Linda was still there, chatting animatedly with the show's presenter. When she saw me, her face twisted with annoyance. "Why are you back?" she hissed. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one night?" Without a word, I thrust my phone in front of her face, the damning video playing on the screen. Linda's face drained of color as she watched herself, her own words, condemning her. What is this?" she sputtered. Then, turning to the presenter, she shrieked. "You! Take this down immediately. I'll sue you for everything you've got." The presenter just laughed. "I could take it down, sure. But it's already been shared thousands of times. You're viral, Linda. Congratulations on your newfound fame." Linda's face contorted with rage. She began grabbing plates off the table, hurling them to the floor. "I'll ruin you," she screamed. "I'll ruin all of you." "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you," the presenter said calmly. "We're still live, you see. Your little tantrum is being broadcast to the whole country right now." Linda froze, her face a mask of horror. The other guests at the table sat in stunned silence, looking as if they wanted the ground to open up and swallow them. James appeared at my side, his face grim. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave," he said firmly. "Now. Or I'll be forced to call the police." As Linda and her entourage disappeared into the night, the presenter turned to me, a sympathetic smile on his face. "Caroline, isn't it?" he said. "Would you mind if we had a quick chat on camera? I think our viewers would love to hear your side of the story." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As the camera turned to me, I took a deep breath. This was my chance to tell my truth, to reclaim my narrative. The aftermath of Linda's public meltdown was swift and merciless. Within days, she was fired from her job in disgrace, her years of manipulating the system finally catching up with her. The influential position she'd wielded like a weapon was gone, along with the respect she'd commanded in society. As for me, I wasted no time. The very next day, I filed for divorce. Mike came to me, his eyes red and pleading, begging for forgiveness. "Caroline, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out, I promise. I'll stand up to Mom, I'll be better." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "It's too late, Mike. You had years to stand up for me, to be a real partner. But you chose your mother over me every single time." The divorce was surprisingly quick. We didn't have much to divide, and Mike, perhaps out of guilt, didn't contest anything. Just like that, 5 years of marriage were dissolved, reduced to nothing more than a signature on a piece of paper. But as one chapter of my life closed, another one opened up in ways I never could have imagined. Chef Paolo approached me a week after the incident. "Caroline," he said, a broad smile on his face, "I've got some news for you. The owner was impressed with how you handled everything. We want to make you the head chef of our restaurant in the city center." It wasn't just the promotion. TV shows started calling, wanting me as a guest. At first, they just wanted me to cook, but soon they were asking me to speak about my experiences, about self-respect and the importance of love and family relationships. I started a YouTube channel, sharing recipes and life advice. The comments section was filled with messages from people who had been through similar experiences, thanking me for giving them the courage to stand up for themselves. One day, my agent, yes, I had an agent now, called with exciting news. "Caroline, I've got multiple offers for you to host your own TV show on cable. Are you interested?" I couldn't believe it. Me, with my own TV show? It was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. As for my former family, well, I heard things through the grapevine. Linda's influence over her sons was waning. Sarah, my former sister-in-law, who had always been Linda's golden child, now openly despised her mother-in-law. Funny how quickly things change when the true nature of a person is revealed. Some people asked if I felt sorry for them, if I regretted how things had turned out. The truth is, I didn't. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. The difference was, I could look myself in the mirror each morning and be proud of the person I saw. My name is Tasha, and 5 years ago, I married Tom, thinking we shared the same dreams and ambitions. We moved into my luxury apartment on the top floor of a high-rise building, with a view that took my breath away every time I looked out the window. I worked as the head of the financial department in a trading company, and my career was on a steep upward trajectory. Tom's mother, Linda, lived nearby and visited us often. From the beginning, she made it clear that she didn't approve of my career-oriented lifestyle. "A woman's place is in the home," she'd say, her lips pursed in disapproval. "You should be taking care of your husband, not gallivanting off to work every day." I tried to keep the peace, smiling and nodding when Linda went on her tirades about the duties of a good wife. But inside, I was seething. I had made it clear to Tom from the start that I wanted to build my career before settling down to have children. He had agreed then, but as time went on, I could see him wavering under his mother's influence. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Tom and Linda sitting at our dining table, heads close together in conversation. They fell silent as soon as I walked in, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Tasha," Tom said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I dropped my bag and sat down, my heart pounding. "What's wrong?" Linda spoke up first. "Tasha, dear, we're worried about you. All this work, it's not healthy. You're neglecting your home, your husband. When are you going to start thinking about having children?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Linda, Tom and I have discussed this. We agreed that we'd focus on our careers first, then think about starting a family." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Tasha, maybe it's time to reconsider. We're not getting any younger, and Mom's right. The apartment's a mess, and I'm tired of eating takeout every night." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Tom, are you serious? We talked about this. You know how important my job is to me. More important than your family?" Linda interjected, her voice sharp. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "My job is how I'm building a future for our family." "I thought you understood that, Tom." I stormed out of the room, locking myself in our bedroom. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of my troubles. Little did I know how right I was. The next morning, I left for work before Tom woke up. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let anyone, not even my husband, derail my ambitions. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't about to give it all up now. I arrived at the office earlier than usual and stayed late into the night, determined to prove my worth. My dedication didn't go unnoticed. A few hours later, my secretary buzzed me. "Mrs. Thompson, the president would like to see you in his office." My heart raced as I made my way to the top floor. Mr. Johnson, our company president, was known for his shrewd business acumen and his tendency to spring surprises on his employees. "Tasha, come in," he said as I knocked on his door. "Have a seat." I perched on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I've been watching your work closely," Mr. Johnson began, his face unreadable. "And I must say, I'm impressed." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you, sir." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We're expanding, Tasha. Merging with a large company from another city. It's a big move, and we need our best people on it." My pulse quickened. Was this going where I thought it was? I'm planning to promote you, he continued. Head of a new department. But I won't lie to you, Tasha. It's going to be tough. You'll have to work harder than you've ever worked before. Are you up for it? I thought about Tom and Linda, about their expectations of me. Then I thought about all the late nights I'd spent poring over financial reports, the satisfaction I felt when a project came together perfectly. Absolutely, sir, I said firmly. And I accept. I won't let you down. As I left Mr. Johnson's office, I felt like I was walking on air. This was what I'd been working towards all these years. I couldn't wait to share the news with Tom. Surely, when he saw how successful I was becoming, he'd understand why my career was so important to me. On my way home, I stopped at our favorite restaurant and ordered all of Tom's favorite dishes. I picked up a bottle of champagne and a bouquet of roses. This was cause for celebration, and I was determined to make it special. I juggled the bags as I unlocked our apartment door. Tom? I called out. I'm home, and I've got a surprise. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch, the TV blaring. He barely looked up as I entered. Tom, you won't believe what happened today, I said, my excitement bubbling over. I'm getting promoted. Head of a new department. Isn't that amazing? Tom muted the TV and turned to face me, his expression far from the joy I'd expected. So, you'll be working even more now, is that it? I felt my smile falter. Well, yes, but think about what this means for us. We'll be able to afford that big house we've always talked about. Regular trips around the world. Our future is set. Tom stood up abruptly. Our future? What future, Tasha? You're never home as it is. When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time we even had a real conversation? I gestured helplessly at the bags I'd brought home. That's why I brought dinner. I thought we could celebrate. Celebrate what? Tom's voice rose. Celebrate you abandoning our marriage for your job? Celebrate the fact that I married a woman who cares more about her career than having a family? I felt tears pricking at my eyes. I thought you'd be happy for me, I whispered. Tom's face softened for a moment, then hardened again. I can't do this anymore, Tasha. Something has to change. With that, he stormed off to his office, slamming the door behind him. I stood in the middle of our living room, surrounded by the trappings of the celebration that would never happen, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. As I mechanically put away the food and poured myself a glass of champagne, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the price of success? And if it was I willing to pay it? One evening, as I was leaving the office, I had an idea. I'd hire a housekeeper. Someone to clean the apartment and cook meals. It would solve Tom's complaints about the messy apartment and lack of home-cooked food. Satisfied with my solution, I made the necessary arrangements. 2 weeks later, I came home to find the apartment spotless, the air filled with the aroma of a home-cooked meal. I smiled to myself, certain that Tom would be pleased. I heard the front door open and close. Tom? I called out. I'm home. And dinner's ready. He walked into the kitchen, his eyes darting around the clean space. What's all this? I hired a housekeeper, I explained, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. She cleans and cooks. I thought it would make things easier for both of us. Instead of the gratitude I expected, Tom's face clouded over. So, this is your solution? Hire someone else to do your job? That's not fair, I protested. I'm trying to find a balance. Balance? Tom laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Tell me, Tasha, now that you've found a replacement for yourself in the kitchen, are you going to find a replacement for yourself in our bed too? I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. How dare you, I hissed. I've done nothing but try to make our life better, and this is how you react. Tom turned away. I'm going out. Don't wait up. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone in the immaculate kitchen, the untouched dinner growing cold on the table. Over the next few days, Tom and I barely spoke. I buried myself in work, focusing on the upcoming merger. It was easier to deal with spreadsheets and financial projections than the mess my personal life had become. Then, one rare Saturday when I didn't have to go into the office, I decided to make an effort. I spent the morning cooking Tom's favorite meals, set the table with our best china, and even put on the dress he'd bought me for our last anniversary. When Tom came home, I was waiting with a smile. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just the two of us." Tom looked at me for a long moment, then nodded silently. My heart leapt. Maybe this was the turning point we needed. I was just about to serve the appetizer when the doorbell rang. Confused, I went to answer it. There, standing in the hallway, was Linda. "Linda," I said, unable to keep the surprise out of my voice. "We weren't expecting you." "Oh, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "Tom, darling, there you are." I watched in dismay as my carefully planned romantic dinner turned into an impromptu family gathering. Linda dominated the conversation, peppering her small talk with not-so-subtle digs at my housekeeping and lack of maternal instincts. "You know," she said, helping herself to more wine, "in my day, a woman knew her place was in the home. We took pride in taking care of our husbands, raising our children." I stood up abruptly. "I think it's time for dessert," I said, fleeing to the kitchen. As I leaned against the counter, trying to regain my composure, I could hear Linda's voice drifting in from the dining room. "Tom, darling, you need to talk some sense into her. A woman's duty is to her family first. Everything else is secondary." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This wasn't how I had imagined my life would be. I had a successful career, a beautiful home, but at what cost? As I listened to Linda's continued lecture on the virtues of traditional family values, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake somewhere along the way. One evening, I came home later than usual, my mind still buzzing with the day's meetings. As I opened the door to our apartment, I froze. There, scattered across the living room floor, were baby clothes. Tiny onesies, miniature socks, even a small pair of shoes. "Tom?" I called out, my voice wavering. "What's all this?" He emerged from the bedroom, a strange look on his face. "Oh, Mom brought those over. She thought it might help you get in the mood." I picked up a small t-shirt, my fingers trembling. "In the mood for what, exactly?" "For starting a family, of course," Tom said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Tasha, we're not getting any younger. It's time we seriously considered having children." I spent the rest of the evening silently putting away the baby clothes, my mind in turmoil. Was I being selfish? Was my ambition destroying my marriage? The next morning, I woke up to find more baby items strategically placed around the apartment. A rattle on the coffee table, a baby book on my nightstand, a high chair in the kitchen. Linda's handiwork, no doubt. I tried to ignore them, but they seemed to multiply. Every day, there was something new. It was as if the apartment was slowly transforming into a nursery, whether I wanted it to or not. One night, I came home to find Linda sitting on our couch, flipping through a parenting magazine. "Linda," I said, unable to keep the irritation out of my voice. "I didn't know you were coming over." She looked up, a saccharine smile on her face. "Oh, Tasha, dear. I hope you don't mind. Tom said I could wait for him here. He's just popped out to get some groceries." I nodded stiffly, heading to the bedroom to change. When I came back out, Linda was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. "You know, Tasha," she said, not turning around. "A view like this is wasted on just two people. Imagine how lovely it would be to have a child toddle up to this window, their little hands pressed against the glass, eyes wide with wonder." I felt a headache coming on. "Linda, I appreciate your concern, but Tom and I will decide when we're ready for children." She turned to face me, her eyes hard. "And when will that be, Tasha? When you've worked yourself into an early grave? When it's too late?" I opened my mouth to argue, but at that moment, Tom walked in, arms full of grocery bags. He looked between us, sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" he asked cautiously. Linda's demeanor changed instantly. "Oh, everything's fine, darling. I was just having a little chat with Tasha about family planning." Tom's eyes lit up. "Really? That's great. I knew you'd come around, Tasha." I felt cornered, outnumbered. I need some air," I mumbled, grabbing my coat and rushing out of the apartment. A few weeks later, I stumbled through the front door, exhausted from another long day at work. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. There, padding around our living room in fluffy pink pajamas, was Linda. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. Tom emerged from the kitchen, a defiant look on his face. "I've decided that Mom is going to live with us. You're always at work, always away from home. I'm tired of being alone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You decided? Without even discussing it with me? When are you ever here to discuss anything?" Tom shot back. I turned to Linda, who was watching our exchange with a smug smile. "You can't stay here. This is my home." Tom's face darkened. "If you're not happy with this arrangement, you can get out." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me? I bought this apartment before we even got married. It's registered in my name. You can't kick me out of my own home." Linda stood up, her face twisted with anger. She took a threatening step towards me. "Now listen here, you ungrateful." I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't come any closer, Linda. If you lay a hand on me, I'll call the police." Linda's face crumpled. She collapsed onto the sofa, clutching her chest dramatically. "Oh, Tom," she wailed. "Did you hear that? She threatened to call the police on me." "Your own wife, threatening your mother? Oh, how she's hardened. That awful job of hers has turned her into a monster." Tom rushed to his mother's side, shooting me a venomous look. "How could you, Tasha? Your own mother-in-law." I couldn't take it anymore. Without another word, I stormed off to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind me. I spent a restless night tossing and turning, my mind racing with the absurdity of the situation. The next morning, I was awakened by my phone ringing. It was Mr. Johnson, my boss. "Tasha, I need you on a plane today," he said without preamble. "We're ready to move forward with the merger. I need you in Chicago ASAP." I've never packed so quickly in my life. As I wheeled my suitcase to the front door, I was met with the stony faces of Tom and Linda. "I have to go on a business trip," I said, my voice cold. "It's for the merger. I'll be back soon." Tom's lip curled. "Don't bother coming back at all." The flight to Chicago was a blur. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. The merger negotiations were intense, requiring all of my focus and energy. But in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my hotel room, the reality of my situation came crashing down. After a grueling week of negotiations and sleepless nights, I finally returned home. As I stood outside my apartment door, suitcases at my feet, I felt a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. I just wanted to collapse into my own bed and forget about the world for a while. I inserted my key into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. Frowning, I tried again. Nothing. A cold feeling of dread washed over me as I realized what must have happened. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. After a moment, it swung open. There stood Tom and Linda, both wearing casual house clothes, looking at me with a mixture of smugness and disdain. "Why doesn't my key work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom let out a harsh laugh. "I changed the locks," he said, his eyes glinting with malice. "You can come in if you're ready to choose your family over your precious career." I stood there, stunned. "What are you talking about?" Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of papers. With a flourish, he presented them to me. "Divorce papers," he said. "It's time to choose, Tasha. Your career or your home? What's it going to be? I looked at Tom, really looked at him, and in that moment, I realized something profound. I didn't love him anymore. The man I had married was gone, replaced by this bitter, manipulative stranger. Linda's shrill voice cut through my thoughts. Well, we're waiting. Make your choice. I took a deep breath, straightening my spine. I choose my career, I said, my voice steady. Because I don't have a family or a husband. Not anymore. Tom's face twisted with anger, but he thrust a pen at me. With a steady hand, I signed the divorce papers right there in the hallway. As soon as I finished, Linda grabbed my arm and roughly pushed me towards the elevator. Good riddance, she spat, slamming the door behind me. I stood there, staring at the closed door of what used to be my home. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, bordering on hysterical. I had just been kicked out of my own apartment, the one I had bought with my hard-earned money. Too tired to make a scene, I gathered my suitcases and made my way to a nearby hotel. A few hours later, I received a call from my friend Rachel, a realtor I had worked with when buying the apartment. Tasha, hon, how are you doing? Rachel asked, concern evident in her voice. I've been better, I admitted. Why do you ask? Rachel hesitated. I've seen Tom's posts on social media. He's saying some pretty nasty things about you. My stomach dropped. What kind of things? He's calling you a soulless careerist who destroyed your family for the sake of your job. Says he sacrificed everything for your relationship and you just used him and tossed him aside. He's even talking about suing you for alimony. People are really sympathizing with him, Tasha. I felt a surge of anger. That's not what happened at all. I didn't think so, Rachel said. Want to tell me your side? I gave her a brief rundown of the events of the past week. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a moment. Oh, Tasha, she finally said. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Listen, I'm going to set the record straight with our friends and colleagues. People need to know the truth. Thanks, Rachel, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. I really appreciate that. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at Tom's lies, gratitude for Rachel's support, and a growing determination. Tom might have taken my home for now, but I wasn't going to let him take my reputation or my dignity. The vibration of my phone startled me out of my thoughts. Mr. Johnson's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach dropped. I took a deep breath and answered. Tasha, we need to talk, Mr. Johnson said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. I've heard some concerning things on social media. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. Sir, I can explain. No need to explain, Tasha, he interrupted. I want to hear your side of the story. Relief washed over me. I took a deep breath and launched into the whole sordid tale, the arguments, Linda moving in, being locked out of my own apartment, and Tom's social media smear campaign. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, to my surprise, Mr. Johnson chuckled. Tasha, do you really think I'd believe that nonsense your ex is spouting? He said. I know you. I've seen your dedication, your work ethic. Don't let this affect your confidence. You have every right to defend yourself, and I want you to know that the company stands behind you. Tears of relief pricked at my eyes. Thank you, sir. You don't know how much that means to me. A couple of days later, my phone pinged with a social media notification. Tom was doing a live broadcast from my apartment. Curious, I tapped on the video. There was Tom, grinning at the camera, surrounded by a film crew. Hey everyone! Exciting news, we're about to start a major renovation on our apartment. The crew from Extreme Makeover, Home Edition will be here in 2 weeks to transform this place. I stared at the screen, a plan forming in my mind. Instead of anger, I felt a sense of calm determination. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel's number. It's Tasha. I need a huge favor, I said the moment she answered. I need you to sell my apartment. Fast. Like, within 2 weeks fast. Rachel let out a low whistle. That's a tall order, Tasha. What's the rush? I quickly explained about Tom's renovation plans. I need new owners in there before that film crew arrives. But Tasha, how am I supposed to show the apartment? Tom changed the locks, remember? I sent her the most recent photos I had of the place. These will have to do. I know it's not ideal, but... Rachel cut me off with a laugh. Oh, honey, you underestimate me. I've got a couple who've been looking for exactly this kind of place in this area. They trust my judgment. With these photos and the reputation of the building, I think I can make this happen. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of work and anticipation. Before I knew it, the day of the big renovation reveal had arrived. I sat in my hotel room, laptop open, watching the live stream with bated breath. The camera panned across my former apartment, now filled with an excited film crew and construction workers. Tom and Linda stood in the center, beaming at the cameras. We're so excited to start this renovation, Tom was saying, his arm around Linda's shoulders. It's time for a fresh start, a new chapter in our lives. Just as the host was about to give the signal to start demolition, there was a commotion off camera. The door burst open, and in walked a smartly dressed couple, followed by a familiar face, Rachel. I'm sorry, but you can't renovate this apartment, the man said, holding up a stack of papers. It belongs to us now. The camera swung wildly as confusion erupted. Tom's face went from shock to anger. What are you talking about? This is my home. Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Actually, Tom, this apartment belonged to your ex-wife, Tasha. She sold it to this lovely couple 2 weeks ago. Your signature on the renovation documents is a forgery. The host of the show turned to Tom, his face livid. You forged documents? Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused? Tom and Linda's faces turned a deep shade of red as the host continued to berate them on live television. The scandal unfolded in real time, with millions of viewers watching as Tom's lies came crashing down around him. I couldn't help but laugh, feeling a mix of vindication and relief. It was over. I had won. With the proceeds from the sale of the apartment, I made a bold move. I bought a charming little house in the city where our company had just completed its merger. It felt poetic, somehow a new home in the city where my career was taking off. To my delight, Mr. Johnson appointed me as the head of our newly acquired company. It was a challenge, but one I was more than ready for. Weeks later, I found myself face to face with Tom again, this time in a courtroom. He had the audacity to demand half of the proceeds from the apartment sale, plus alimony. I watched with satisfaction as the judge denied his claims, citing his attempt to unlawfully seize my property and the forged documents. As we left the courthouse, Tom approached me, his earlier bravado replaced by desperation. Tasha, please, he begged. I'm sorry for everything. Can't we start over? Give our marriage another chance? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of freedom. I laughed, not unkindly, but with finality. No, Tom, I said, shaking my head. We can't start over. But I can start anew, and that's exactly what I'm doing. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. My career was soaring, I was leading a successful merger, respected by my peers and superiors alike. I had a beautiful new home, one that was truly mine. Life before Michael was pretty straight-laced. Wake up, trade a bit on the stock exchange, head to my job in online advertising, then rinse and repeat. Simple, mundane, but it was mine. I always figured that someday I'd add a family to the mix, husband, kids, the whole shebang. I met Michael at a seminar for amateur traders. He was a speaker, all confidence and broad smiles, talking about big moves in the real estate market. After his talk, we ended up at the same coffee station. Strong coffee, strong investments, right? He joked, pouring himself a cup. Something like that. But I usually go for less volatile stocks myself, I replied, trying to sound more savvy than I felt. Oh, playing it safe, huh? I like taking a bit more risk, he said with a wink. That wink should have been my first warning, but who was I to know? We started seeing each other, and things moved fast, swept up in romance and the excitement of it all. He was 10 years older, had his life figured out, or so it seemed. Loads of charm, money, and promises that came easy to him. About a year into our whirlwind romance, Michael popped the question on a chilly evening, right there on the balcony of his fancy high-rise apartment. "Marry me, Sarah. I want all my tomorrows to start with you," he said, holding out a ring that was frankly too flashy for my taste. But who was I to complain? It felt like a dream. 2 days before the wedding, Michael dropped another surprise, just as we were finalizing our dinner menu. "We need to talk about something, Sarah. It's important," he said, serious all of a sudden. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, figuring it was just some last-minute guest list drama. "I think we should sign a prenuptial agreement," he said, avoiding my eyes. "A prenup? Now? 2 days before the wedding?" I was shocked, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" "It's just practical, Sarah. It's not about us, it's about protecting what we've got. You know, just in case. I've got a lot tied up in real estate, and you're doing well with your trading. It's just standard stuff. My lawyer drafted something up. He says it's pretty standard, protects both of us." His casual dismissal stung. "Standard for who, Michael? Your lawyer? I don't even have one." "Look, he's a good guy. He'll take care of everything, even talk you through it." "On me, of course. I'll pay for it," he added quickly, as if that would smooth everything over. I remember standing there in his kitchen, feeling like a complete outsider in what was supposed to be my future home, with my future husband who suddenly seemed like a stranger. But I was too deep in, too embarrassed to call anything off, and honestly, too scared to start over. So, I caved. "Fine. Let's just get this over with," I muttered, feeling a mix of defeat and anger boiling inside. "Great, I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow. You'll see, it's all standard stuff," Michael assured me, but his reassurances felt hollow. The next day, his lawyer, a slick guy named Ron, walked me through the document. "It's all very straightforward," Ron assured me, flipping through pages that might as well have been written in another language. "You keep what's yours, he keeps his. Clean and simple." Clean and simple, right. If only I knew then just how complicated things would get. After the whirlwind of the wedding, which honestly was more of a blur of faces and congratulations than anything, Michael and I settled into what you could call married life. But even that felt more like living with a charming roommate than a husband, what with all the terms we'd signed off on. Michael's life was a series of business calls and trips. "Gotta keep the wheels turning, Sarah," he'd say, kissing my forehead before jetting off to some city or another. I mostly stayed back, working from home, trading stocks like it was my lifeline. It wasn't the family life I'd pictured, but then again, what was? His business was booming, and my trading wasn't doing too bad either. But whenever I brought up maybe putting my earnings into buying a place for me, Michael had his own ideas. "Hold off on that, babe. I'm eyeing a new property, could use a bit more liquidity," he'd say, always planning the next big purchase. One evening, he came home more stressed than usual. "Market's brutal, babe. Got a loan coming up due that I totally spaced on," he admitted over a too-late dinner. "Can't you roll it over or something?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. "That's the kicker. It's tied up with my other assets. Bit of a cash flow snag," he explained, sounding tired. Suddenly he remembered my savings, the ones I'd been hoping to put towards a house, maybe start that dream family. "You could help," he said slowly. "I mean, it'll ease the snag." Michael looked at me then pleadingly, really looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. "Okay, I'll do it. What's mine is yours," I said, echoing the words he hadn't exactly said but had implied in so many ways. Right, of course, babe. It's just until this thing smooths over. I'll pay you back, he promised, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and love. Love because I believed in us, in him. Apprehension because, deep down, I knew money and love were a messy mix. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months. Michael's promises of repayment became as frequent as his business trips, mentioned but never fulfilled. Our conversations about it were circular, always ending with him kissing my forehead and promising, "Soon, babe, soon." And me? I believed him every time. Or at least, I wanted to. Because confronting the truth, that this was becoming less of a marriage and more of a business arrangement, was a reality I wasn't ready to face. The arrival of our son, Jack, was supposed to be the happiest time in our lives, but it quickly turned into one of the most challenging. Michael was often away on business trips, leaving me to juggle the baby, household duties, and my own work. I wasn't just riding the emotional roller coaster of a new mom, I was doing it pretty much on my own. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of balancing Jack on my hip while trading on my laptop, I broached a topic that had been weighing on me. "Michael, I was thinking, maybe we could get a little help? Like a nanny?" I suggested tentatively over dinner. Michael, who had just returned from a trip to Chicago, looked up from his plate, eyebrows raised. "A nanny? Sarah, come on, we agreed you'd handle home stuff. Jack needs his mom, not some stranger." "But I'm also trying to work, Michael. The trading doesn't just happen by itself, and it's our livelihood too," I countered, feeling the frustration bubble up inside. "You're doing fine. What, you want a medal for doing what you're supposed to do?" His tone was dismissive, and it stung more than I expected. "You knew what you were signing up for. I'm out earning, you're home with the kid. We're both doing our parts, right?" As weeks turned into months, the financial strain began to show. Michael stopped transferring money to our joint account, leaving me to handle all the expenses, the taxes on the house, the car payments, groceries, clothes, everything for Jack. It wasn't just the physical toll, the financial juggle was becoming a nightmare. One night, after paying the latest batch of bills and realizing my account was running dangerously low, I confronted Michael. He had just come back from another trip and was in a surly mood. "Michael, the joint account is dry. I had to use my savings to cover everything these last few months. When can you transfer some money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He scoffed, tossing his keys on the table. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You live in my house, drive my car, and you're still complaining? You should be grateful." "Grateful? Michael, I am managing everything here while you're gone. I'm not asking for thanks, but I need support," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "Look, I'm dealing with a lot right now. The business needs every penny." "You're not the only one with pressures, Sarah," he retorted before heading off to the shower, effectively ending the conversation. It was clear I was on my own. I couldn't rely on Michael, I needed to ensure financial security for myself and Jack. That's when I threw myself into stock trading more seriously. Each day, after Jack fell asleep, I'd stay up, researching and making trades. Slowly, my account began to grow, bolstered by a series of successful deals. Keeping this a secret from Michael felt wrong, but necessary. He had made it clear that his money was his. Well, mine would be mine. I set up a separate account he didn't know about, moving my trading profits there. It was the only slice of independence I felt I could cling to. Jack was growing up fast, and with him, the daily logistics were becoming more complicated. The old car we had was barely hanging on, not nearly spacious enough for his stroller and all the paraphernalia that seemed necessary whenever we stepped out the door. One morning, while Michael was sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, I brought up the topic. "I need a new car, Michael. The trunk in this one just isn't cutting it for Jack's stuff." He didn't look up from his screen. "And you're telling me this why? Planning to make me pay for it?" "No, I've got it covered. I've been saving up from trading," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. that got his attention. His eyes narrowed as he put down his phone. "Oh, you've got money, huh? Well, that's great because I need some cash. The business could use a boost right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Again with the money? What about the money I lent you before? You promised to pay that back, and you haven't. I need a car for Jack, not to sink more into your endless business needs." He shrugged, a smirk forming. "Business is what keeps us living in style, Sarah. You should know that by now. Help me out, and I'll get you a new car later." I stood my ground this time. "No, Michael, no more. I need to take care of our son. I'm buying the car with or without your help." For a moment, he looked shocked, like he couldn't believe I was defying him. Then his expression hardened. "Fine, how about this? If you're so set on this path, maybe we shouldn't be together. You want to split? Because trust me, you won't get a dime in the divorce. Remember that prenup you signed?" His words were like a slap. I knew the prenup was there, but his threat to use it so bluntly was still a shock. "If that's how you see our marriage, then maybe a divorce is the best thing," I said quietly, the reality of our crumbling relationship hitting me all at once. "Fine by me. But remember, you leave with what you came with, nothing. And you'll need to find a new place to live. Consider this your 3-day notice," he said coldly, pulling out a drawer and tossing the prenuptial agreement on the table between us. I glanced at the document, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. "You think you can just throw me and Jack out like we're nothing? I've been here through everything, supporting you, never asking for anything more than what I put into this family." He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. "You think any of that matters? I've got the best lawyers. Don't try to fight me, Sarah. You'll lose. And don't think about taking anything from here, or I'll sue." Packing was a blur of tears and determination. I collected mine and Jack's belongings, leaving behind everything that Michael could claim as his. I wasn't going to give him any reason to come after me legally. The apartment I found was small, but it was ours, and it was close to Jack's kindergarten, which made life a little easier. Every day, as I walked him to school, I felt a bit more grounded, a bit more like I could do this, raise my son and rebuild our lives. The stock market became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I traded with a ferocity born of necessity, the need to provide for Jack and keep us afloat without any help from Michael. Nights were the hardest, after Jack went to bed and the world quieted down. That's when the doubts and the loneliness crept in. But every time I wanted to give in to despair, I'd look at the numbers climbing in my account, and I'd find the strength to keep pushing. Divorce proceedings were as cold and swift as Michael's farewell. The prenuptial agreement held up, leaving me with nothing but child support, which was a pittance compared to what Michael made. He fought dirty, too, throwing around threats to take Jack if I pushed for any of the money I'd lent him for that so-called urgent loan. It was during one of those mornings, dropping Jack off at kindergarten, that I met Laura. She was the mother of Emily, a little girl with a wild mop of curls and a laugh that could light up a room. Laura and I hit it off immediately, often finding ourselves chatting long after the kids had scampered off to their morning activities. One sunny afternoon, as we watched our kids play, Laura turned to me, her expression curious. "You always seem so together, Sarah. How do you do it?" "I mean, I struggle, and it's just me." I shrugged, my eyes on Jack, who was busy constructing a sandcastle. "I guess you just learned to cope, you know? Keep pushing through." We talk about everything and nothing, movies, books, our wild dreams of vacations in exotic places. But I never brought up Michael or the divorce. That part of my life was locked away, a chapter one was determined to close. One day, as we watched Jack and Emily scramble up the steps of a slide, Laura nudged me gently. "You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Us single moms have to stick together." I smiled, the warmth from her offer spreading through me. "Thanks, Laura. That means a lot." After a particularly good day on the stock exchange, I felt a rare surge of optimism. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the win, or maybe I just needed a change of scenery from the usual routine. Whatever it was, I called up Laura and suggested dinner at a new restaurant downtown. Sounds like a celebration is in order. What's the occasion? Laura asked as we settled into our seats at the chic, softly lit venue. Just a good day at work, I replied, trying to keep it casual, but inside I was buzzing. It felt like things were finally looking up. As we sipped on our drinks and chatted about mundane things like kindergarten antics and weekend plans, I felt the weight of the past months lighten a bit. But just as I was beginning to relax, a familiar voice chilled the air around us. Well, if it isn't Sarah. Looking a bit rough, aren't we? Michael's voice was unmistakable. I looked up to see him standing there, smirking, with a woman clinging to his arm. I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger. Michael, I greeted stiffly, wishing the earth would swallow me whole. And this is Vanessa, my fiancée. Isn't she just stunning? Vanessa gave a tight-lipped smile, eyeing me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Yes, Michael always did have a taste for, well, never mind. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Michael leaned in, lowering his voice, though not his malice. Seriously, Sarah, you look like you've aged a decade. What happened to you? I remained silent, not trusting myself to speak without my voice shaking. Laura, however, was not about to let it slide. Sarah's doing just fine, better even. Looks to me like life's treating her well. Michael snorted, giving me a final sneering look before turning away. Come on, Vanessa, let's leave the past where it belongs. After they left, Laura turned to me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. What was that all about? He's awful. And who talks like that? Taking a deep breath, I filled her in on the brief version of my marriage, the high hopes, the prenup, the threats, the fallout. Everything spilled out in a low, hurried stream. Laura's eyes widened with every detail. Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were dealing with all that? And a prenup? I'm a family lawyer, you know. I want to see that prenup. There could be something there, some way to challenge it. A few days later, I was in Laura's office, handing over the dusty documents that had sealed my fate. She pored over them with a furrowed brow, her pen flying over the pages as she made notes. Sarah, there are several issues here, she finally said, looking up from the papers. First, this was signed too close to the wedding. It's a pressure tactic. Second, you didn't have independent legal advice, which is huge. And third, he didn't disclose all his financial obligations, like that loan you ended up covering. That's misrepresentation. My heart raced as she laid out each point. It means, Laura continued with a smile, that we might just be able to challenge this. We've got a real shot here, Sarah. Sitting in the cold, stark courtroom, my hands were trembling, despite my best efforts to appear calm. The weight of what was at stake pressed heavily upon me, not just the potential financial outcome, but the deeper, more personal vindication against Michael's long-standing control and threats. Before the judge had even called the session to order, Michael leaned towards me from where he stood a few paces away. His voice was low, a venomous whisper meant only for me. You're a loser, Sarah. You can never beat me. I'll ruin you. And when I'm done, I'll take Jack from you too. Laura, standing by my side, gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze before we were called to present our case. As the proceedings began, Laura was methodical and fierce. She laid out the facts, pointing to the rushed nature of the prenuptial agreement signing and the glaring lack of independent legal counsel. She highlighted the financial disclosures that Michael had conveniently omitted, which directly impacted the terms of the prenup. Your Honor, the agreement my client was coerced into signing was not only unfair but fundamentally flawed in its execution, Laura argued passionately. We have clear grounds here to question its validity. Michael's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that everything had been above board, that I was merely having regrets after the fact. But Laura dismantled his points with precise legal references and the undeniable weight of evidence she'd compiled. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. After reviewing the evidence and the circumstances under which the prenuptial agreement was signed, I am ruling to annul the agreement due to significant violations in its execution." The courtroom seemed to spin for a moment. Laura turned to me, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "We did it, Sarah," she whispered. Michael's reaction was instantaneous. His face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before as he stood up, his chair clattering behind him. "This isn't over. You won't get a dime from me," he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The judge warned him to settle down, but Michael's fury was palpable. As we left the courthouse, he followed, his threats spewing out like venom. I turned on my dictaphone and let it record every bitter word, every promise of revenge. "You'll regret this, Sarah. I'll make sure of it," he hissed as we walked down the courthouse steps. Later, at the police station, I played the recording. An officer took notes, his expression growing increasingly concerned with each threat uttered. "We'll give him a warning. He's not to contact you or approach you. Any further incidents, and we'll take more serious action," he promised. As I left the police station, the legal documents confirming my ownership of 2 city center apartments and several commercial properties securely in my bag, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Over $2 million in assets, it was almost impossible to comprehend. But more than the financial security, it was the freedom from Michael's shadow that felt like my true victory. The passive income from renting out real estate was more than enough to provide for Jack and me, and it allowed me to cut back on the frantic trading that had consumed so much of my time. These days, I spend a lot more time with Jack. He's growing up fast, and every moment with him feels precious. We often visit the park, and I watch him play, his laughter mingling with the breeze. One sunny afternoon, as Jack played on the swings, Laura joined us, her daughter Emily in tow. She plopped down on the bench next to me, a smile spreading across her face. "You look good, Sarah. Really good. Like a weight's been lifted," she observed, handing me a cup of coffee she'd picked up on her way. "Thanks, Laura. It feels that way, too," I replied, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. "I'm thinking about buying a house, you know, a real home for Jack and me. Something with a garden, maybe even a place for a dog." As we talked, the conversation shifted to Michael and how dramatically things had changed. Laura kept up with the legal community grapevine, which had plenty to say about my ex-husband's downfall. Word is, Michael's not doing so well. His new fiancée, Vanessa, left him, and a lot of his business partners have pulled back. They don't want to be associated with his reputation after the trial, Laura said, not hiding her disdain. I nodded, not surprised, but relieved I was no longer part of that drama. "I heard about Vanessa. Can't say I'm surprised she didn't stick around. Michael's true colors are hard to live with." The idea of Michael's downfall didn't bring me joy, but there was a sense of justice in seeing someone who had done so much harm finally face the consequences of his actions. I was just glad to be out of the storm and into calmer waters. Our conversation drifted to lighter topics, upcoming school events, vacation plans, and community activities. Normal life stuff, the kind I had longed for during all those tumultuous years. Later that day, after Emily and Laura had left, Jack and I walked home, his small hand in mine. "Mom, can we really get a dog?" he asked, his eyes wide with hope. "Yeah, buddy, we can." I smiled down at him. "We'll have a big yard for him to play in, and you can help pick him out." Jack's excitement was infectious, and as we talked about what kind of dog we might get, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the new life we were able to build. It was a far cry from the uncertainty and strife of the past years. I no longer looked over my shoulder, worried about what Michael might do next. Instead, I looked forward, to house viewings, to Jack's laughter filling a home that was truly ours, to new memories made in a garden under the sun, and to the simple joy of picking out our new dog. My life's pretty standard for a young teacher, really. I'm Maya, and after grinding away at a teacher training college, I finally landed a gig at one of the best schools around. My plans? Teach, maybe write a bit on the side, and start a family with the right guy, whenever he decided to show up. That right guy thing happened faster than I expected, courtesy of my college buddy, Jess. Maya, you have to meet Tom, Jess had insisted over coffee one windy Saturday afternoon. He's looking for something real, and you too. I dunno, I just have a feeling about this. Tom and I met at a local dive bar that evening. He was easy to spot, a head taller than most and with a laugh that filled up the room. I was nervous, fixing my hair like 100 times, but when he smiled, all that anxiety melted. Hey, you must be Maya. Jess hasn't stopped talking about you. No pressure, right? Tom joked, pulling out a chair for me. Yeah, no pressure at all, I laughed, settling down. Just deciding the course of my future in one evening. We hit it off instantly. Tom was in finance, a bit dry for my taste, but he made it sound like an adventure every time he talked about his day. He loved hiking, hated sushi, and had a soft spot for cheesy 80s movies. 2 years later, we were setting up our own little home. The wedding was nothing fancy, just close friends and family in a small garden ceremony. It was perfect for us. Tom's mom, Elaine, seemed nice enough, always with a polite smile and ready with a helping hand. We were off to a good start, or so I thought. Living together was a breeze at first. Tom was supportive, and we backed each other up, no matter what. Then the pressure started, subtly at first, but then all the damn time. Maya, when are you two giving me a grandkid? You know, Tom's my only shot at this. Elaine would drop casually into conversation every time she visited. It was like a broken record, each time more pressing than the last. I tried to play it cool, keep the peace. We're working on it, Elaine. These things take time, I'd say, forcing a smile while chopping veggies or setting the table. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, Tom turned to me, his expression softening. Hey, sorry about Mom. She's just eager. We're okay, aren't we? Yeah, we're okay, I assured him, though part of me wondered just how long we could keep batting away the pressure before it started to crack something inside us. Living with the constant pressure to start a family was like walking on eggshells that kept stacking higher. Elaine's reminders were relentless, and with each visit, her patience seemed to wear thinner, like sandpaper against my already frayed nerves. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Tom and I were enjoying a rare day off together. We were in the middle of a lazy breakfast when Elaine's car pulled up. Before she even stepped in, I knew we were in for another round of her grandkid campaign. Morning, you too. I was just at Linda's grandkid's christening. Adorable little thing. So, any news on my future grandchild? Elaine breezed into the kitchen like a whirlwind of expectation. Tom choked on his coffee, coughing a polite morning, Mom. I plastered a smile on my face, bracing myself. Hi, Elaine. We're just enjoying our breakfast. Want some coffee? I offered, trying to divert the conversation. No, I'm fine. Just here for a quick chat. Maya, you're not getting any younger. You know, it's all about timing. You need to be more proactive. Maybe see a doctor, or try those fertility treatments I was reading about, Elaine suggested, her voice a mix of faux concern and barely concealed urgency. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. We are perfectly capable of handling it, Elaine. And we will see a doctor if we think it's necessary, not because we're on a deadline, I snapped, a little louder than intended. Tom's hand found mine under the table, a silent plea for calm. Mom, really, it's our life. We'll take care of it. Let's not ruin a nice morning, he said, his tone firm yet respectful. Elaine sighed, a theatrical display of her frustration. I'm just saying, I want to see my grandkids while I'm still able to enjoy them. Is that too much to ask? There's more to our lives than just making babies, Elaine. We have careers, our own plans. I started, but Tom squeezed my hand, a gentle warning to tread lightly. I know. But remember, family is everything, Elaine retorted, her words sharp as she grabbed her purse. I'll leave you to your plans then. Just think about what I said, okay? After she left, the tension lingered like a bad odor. Tom and I spent the rest of the morning in silence, each lost in our thoughts. It was clear Elaine's visits were becoming a battleground, and we were always on the defense. That evening, we decided to take a walk, needing to clear the air. She's my mom and I love her, but I can't stand how she pushes us. It's like she's ticking boxes off some life checklist, Tom vented as we strolled through the park. I get it, she's excited, but it feels like she's more worried about being a grandma than our happiness or health, I replied, frustration simmering. It's like we're not real to her unless we produce a grandchild. We need to set some boundaries, Maya. Next time she starts up, we need to be clear, firm, but clear, Tom said, his hand tightening around mine. As we headed back home, the weight of our situation settled in my stomach like a stone. Setting boundaries with Elaine was going to be tough, but necessary. I wasn't just fighting for our peace, I was fighting for our future, whatever it might hold. Finally, after all the trials and tense dinners, our biggest wish came true, I was pregnant. Tom and I were over the moon, floating on a kind of happy haze that felt almost unreal. But with our good news, came the revival of Elaine's overbearing enthusiasm, dialed up to a whole new level. We had just started fixing up what would be the baby's room, painting the walls a gentle, calming color, and assembling a crib that took more patience than I thought I had. It was during one of those DIY afternoons that Elaine showed up, unannounced as usual, wearing a bright pink t-shirt that screamed future grandmother in bold, impossible to miss letters. Look at this, isn't it cute? Elaine beamed, stretching the fabric out for us to see. Got it custom made. Elaine, could you maybe not announce it to everyone yet? We're still early in the process, and, just trying to be cautious. I tried to sound as gentle as possible, hoping to temper her excitement without sparking an argument. Oh, honey, when you've got news this good, you shout it from the rooftops. Everyone's thrilled for us. Elaine's voice rose with each word, her excitement bubbling over like a pot left too long on the stove. The next few weeks were a blur of Elaine's constant check-ins. She was always calling or dropping by, armed with old wives' tales about pregnancy do's and don'ts, making sure I ate this and avoided that, fussing over my schedule and sleep. It was suffocating. Elaine, I appreciate your help, really, but you hovering like this is stressing me out, I finally snapped one evening after she lectured me on the importance of prenatal yoga for the umpteenth time. The pressure didn't let up, though, and neither did my schedule. Balancing teaching with pregnancy wasn't easy, but I was determined to keep things as normal as possible. That is, until one day at school, halfway through explaining a math problem to my fourth graders, I felt a sharp pain that cut my sentence short. The room spun, the chalk slipped from my hand, and then darkness. I woke up in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic flooding my senses, before my eyes even opened. Tom was there, his face pale and drawn, holding my hand like it was a lifeline. The doctors, they had to do a surgery, he whispered, his voice cracking. It was serious, Maya. You almost didn't, we lost the baby. The words hit like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. Tears streamed down my face, uncontrollable, bitter. I was alive, but at what cost? The doctor came in, his face somber as he adjusted his glasses. Maya, I'm afraid the complications were severe. You won't be able to have children in the future. This was a very rare and unfortunate situation. The room felt colder, the walls seemed to close in. I lay there in the hospital bed, the weight of this new reality settling heavily on my chest. Tom squeezed my hand, his presence a small comfort in the vast ocean of my grief. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Elaine stormed into my hospital room like a whirlwind of misplaced anger and desperation. I heard what happened. So, when are you trying again? We need to start planning, she blurted out the moment she entered, barely even acknowledging my state. I was still hooked to a drip, the dull throbbing in my abdomen a constant reminder of what I'd lost. Elaine, I can't have children anymore. The surgery, my voice broke, the reality hitting me again like a cold wave. What do you mean you can't? That's nonsense. Elaine's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. She stormed out of the room, presumably to find a doctor who would contradict the irreversible truth. Tom held my hand, his eyes filled with silent apologies for his mother's harshness. It wasn't long before Elaine returned, her fury now fueled by the confirmation of my condition. They said what? This is absurd. You've taken away my chance to be a grandmother. She was yelling so loud that a nurse peeked inside, her eyes wide with concern. Mom, please. Tom interjected. This isn't helping. Maya needs rest. Rest? What she needs is to think about her family, about us. This is selfish. Elaine's words were like daggers, each one slicing through the little composure I had left. I'm not choosing this, Elaine. Why can't you understand? I almost died, I said, my voice a mixture of pain and frustration. Elaine's eyes narrowed. If you were more careful, this wouldn't have happened. You've always been too career-focused. Maybe that's why. Enough. Tom's voice boomed across the room. Mom, leave. Now. We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable. But she wasn't done. Turning to me, her voice venomous, she hissed, You're not worthy of my son. You can't give him what he needs. You're not a real woman. Her words stung, burning into my memory. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, the saltiness mingling with the bitterness of her judgment. Tom practically dragged her out, her protests still audible down the hallway. Recovery was slow. When I finally returned home, the emptiness was overwhelming. I attempted to go back to teaching, to find solace in the routine and the laughter of children, but each joyful shriek was a reminder of what I'd lost. Seeing a psychologist helped, somewhat. You need to grieve, Maya, not just for your child, but for the part of your life that is now behind you, Dr. Peterson told me in one of our sessions. Her words, meant to heal, somehow also underscored the finality of my loss. One day, amidst a particularly difficult week, I made a decision. I can't teach right now, I confessed to Tom over a quiet dinner. I see them, and I see what I lost. I'm thinking of the library. It's peaceful, quiet. So, I took a position at the local library, leaving the bustling corridors of the school for the muted aisles lined with literature and quiet patrons. It was a place where my heart could start to mend, away from the prying eyes and the heavy expectations. Even after the shift to the quiet life of the library, Elaine's shadow loomed over us, her persistence on the topic of grandchildren unyielding. Her approach became more invasive, her accusations more pointed as the days turned into months. It was my birthday, a day I hoped would be filled with light-hearted moments and a break from the relentless pressure. As I was about to cut the cake, Elaine cornered me in the kitchen, her voice a hissing whisper. When are you going to fix this, Maya? You need to give Tom children. She spat, her words stinging with venom. I froze, the knife in my hand trembling slightly. Elaine, Tom and I have been thinking about adoption. It's a beautiful way to form a family, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Adoption? Over my dead body. Elaine exploded, her face contorted with disgust. I won't have you bring some stranger's child into our family. Who knows what kind of sick, twisted genes they have. No grandchild of mine will come from someone who couldn't even keep them. Her outburst echoed through the kitchen, and a hushed silence fell over the nearby living room. I felt the eyes of everyone on us, their presence a heavy blanket. That's enough, Elaine. I snapped, the knife clattering to the countertop as I faced her squarely. You don't get to decide how Tom and I build our family. This is our life, our choice. Elaine's eyes narrowed, and with a huff, she stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her with a force that made the windows rattle. The room remained silent, the joy of the day sucked out with her departure. The seed of discord Elaine planted grew rapidly. The whispers started subtly at first, a nudge here, a look there, suggesting I had been reckless during my pregnancy. The rumors morphed into malicious gossip that I had been drinking and behaving indecently, which supposedly led to my miscarriage. Fury built up in me like a storm. One evening, after overhearing a particularly nasty version of the rumor from a so-called friend, I confronted Elaine over the phone. Elaine, this has to stop now. Spreading lies about me is not only hurtful, it's slander. And I won't tolerate it anymore. If I hear one more rumor, I'm going to the police, and I will sue you for libel," I threatened, my voice cold and hard. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of silence that felt like the calm before a storm. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and devoid of its usual fire. "You wouldn't dare. Try me, Elaine. I'm done playing nice." After that call, the rumors stopped as suddenly as they had started. But the damage was done. The relationship was strained, the family gatherings now marked by a chilly formality that even the warmest smiles couldn't thaw. Life seemed to have returned to normal, but everything has changed, thanks to some perverted sense of humor. One morning, I found the first of many electronic postcards in my inbox. The image showed a smiling family, 2 parents with children playing around them, the picture of happiness. Below it, in cruel, stark letters, was written, "You will never be a mother." My heart sank, and a shiver ran down my spine. Who would send something so hateful? As if that wasn't enough, the physical manifestations of this hatred soon followed. One afternoon, upon returning from work, I found a box on our porch. Inside, grotesquely smeared with ketchup, were dolls. Attached was a note that twisted the knife deeper. "This is your fault. You are to blame for losing your child." I was horrified. Each new message, each package, felt like a blow to my already fragile state. Tears were my constant companions as I tried to grapple with the cruelty of these attacks. "Tom, look at this," I said one evening, handing him another vile package. My hands were shaking, my voice barely a whisper. "It's too much. I can't take it anymore." Tom was quick to act. "The neighbor, Mr. Jennings, he's got cameras all over his place. Maybe he caught something on video." We approached Mr. Jennings the next day, who was more than willing to help. He played back the recordings, and there, in clear, undeniable footage, was Elaine. The sight of her, stealthily placing those ghastly parcels at our door, was both a relief and a fresh hell. "Can't believe Mom would go this far," Tom muttered, disgust written all over his face. Armed with the evidence, we confronted Elaine at her house. The video was paused on the screen, her image frozen in the act of hatred. "Look at this, Mom. How could you?" Tom's voice was icy, his usual warmth gone. He pushed the laptop towards her, the betrayal in his voice echoing around the room. Elaine glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, without a hint of remorse, she shrugged. "She's spoiled goods, Tom. An inferior woman who can't carry on the family line. I did what I had to do, for you, for the family's sake." Tom stepped in front of me, his posture protective. "If you can't accept Maya, then you can't be a part of our lives. This is your last chance, Mom. Apologize, or we're done." Elaine's face hardened, her eyes cold. "I'm only doing this for you, Tom. She's taking you away from what you deserve." The ride home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. I was reeling, the weight of Elaine's betrayal heavy on my shoulders. Tom was seething, the ties with his mother stretched to their breaking point. Tom had been unusually quiet lately, his usual cheer dimmed by the strained silence between him and his mother. It was clear he missed her, despite everything. So, when the Christmas invitation from Elaine came, I agreed for his sake, hoping against hope for some sort of reconciliation. We arrived to a house bustling with relatives and friends, the air thick with the scent of pine and mulled wine. Elaine greeted us with a tight smile, her eyes darting nervously. I took a deep breath, clinging to Tom's arm as we mingled among the guests. The evening progressed smoothly at first, laughter and chatter filling the room. Then, midway through, Tom's ex-fiancée, Sarah, appeared. The room tensed as Elaine ushered her in. "As you all know, Maya here can't have children. So, I think it's time Tom reconsidered his options. Sarah is more than willing to take her place and give me the grandchildren I deserve," Elaine announced, her voice ringing clear and cruel. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. Tom's voice, low and furious, broke the silence. "Mom, what are you talking about? I didn't agree to any of this." I couldn't hold it in any longer. "How could you?" My eyes scanned the crowd, landing on each face as I continued. "Elaine has been tormenting me. Sending me hateful messages, leaving disturbing packages at our door." I pulled out my phone, showing the video from Mr. Jennings' camera. The footage played, revealing Elaine's vile actions for all to see. Murmurs of shock and disgust rippled through the room. Sarah, looking equally horrified, stepped forward. "I had no idea about any of this. Elaine just invited me here under the guise of catching up. I'm actually engaged to someone else, and I'm not looking to disrupt that." She turned to me, her expression apologetic. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no part in this plan. I never wanted children, which is why Tom and I split." The room was now a cauldron of whispers and stunned faces. Elaine's friends and relatives slowly started to leave, their expressions ranging from embarrassed to outraged. It was clear where their sympathies lay. Elaine, now pale and flustered, tried to salvage her dignity. "But I was just trying to ensure my son had a proper family." Tom's voice was cold, final. "By destroying the family you already had? I don't consider you my mother anymore. We're done, Elaine." Months had passed since that disastrous Christmas, and life had started to settle into a new, peaceful rhythm. Tom and I had been busy with the adoption process, our hearts and minds focused on the child who would soon become part of our family. It was a time of hope and healing, but it wasn't long before Elaine tried to wedge herself back into our lives. One brisk morning, a knock at the door disrupted the quiet. I opened it to find Elaine standing there, eyes red, a picture of contrition. "Maya, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I've made some terrible mistakes. Can we talk?" Her voice trembled, and for a moment, I saw the vulnerability of a woman who realized she had gone too far. "I'm listening," I said, guardedly, leaving the door ajar as a reminder that she was not welcome to step inside. "I've been so foolish, so driven by my own desires, that I lost sight of what's important. I've hurt you and Tom deeply, and I'm sorry. Truly, I am. Can we start over? Please?" "Elaine, after everything that's happened, it's not that simple. Tom and I are moving forward with adopting a child. That's our focus now," I said, the firmness in my voice reflecting the resolve in my heart. The mention of adoption triggered something in her, her face contorting as the old prejudices bubbled to the surface. "You can't seriously be considering bringing someone else's child into this family. It's wrong." "That's exactly what we are doing, Elaine. And it's not your decision. It's ours," I shot back, my patience fraying. "This is madness, Maya. You're making a mistake. A real family." "No, Elaine. We're done here." Without waiting for her to respond, I closed the door firmly in her face, the click of the latch sounding like the final seal on our relationship. Inside, Tom was standing at the top of the stairs, having heard the exchange. "Everything okay?" he asked, coming down to join me. "I think it finally is," I said, leaning into his embrace. "I told her we're adopting, and she didn't take it well. It's really over this time." Tom nodded, his expression resolute. "Let's make it official then." Together, we blocked Elaine's number on our phones and sent messages to our friends and family, explaining that we had decided to sever ties with her for the sake of our future family's peace and well-being. The adoption process moved forward, and each step brought with it a surge of excitement and anticipation. We filled out forms, attended interviews, and prepared a room filled with love and the promise of new beginnings. As the waiting drew to a close, I felt a pull towards my old life, the classroom. I returned to teaching, the joy of interacting with the children rekindling a light within me that had dimmed during those dark times. Standing in front of my class, I realized how much I had grown, how resilient I had become. The children's laughter echoed through the halls, a sweet sound that filled the empty spaces left by lost dreams. It reminded me that while some doors close, others open. And behind this new door was a future bright with the colors of hope and the laughter of a child who would call us mom and dad. I'm Sarah, just a regular woman who's seen her share of life's ups and downs. For 24 long years, I've been the backbone of a family that didn't always see or appreciate my worth. My husband, Richard, has a bit of fame as a TV presenter on a channel that's barely hanging on to its viewers. Then there's my daughter, Emily, who at 18 thinks she's got the world figured out, and my son, Mark, who moved out to start his own life at 23. After spending the best years of my life making sure everyone else was taken care of, I decided it was high time to dust off my old dreams. I used to be pretty good with dogs, even trained as a handler once. So, I got a job at the pet shelter down the road. You'd think I'd announced I was running off to join the circus, the way Richard reacted. Working at a shelter, Sarah? Really? Have you lost your mind? Richard scoffed as he flipped through the channels, not even looking at me. It's just part-time, and I like it. It makes me happy, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady against his disdain. Happy? We're not teenagers, Sarah. Grow up. You spending time with those strays is embarrassing. What will people say? His words were sharp, cutting deeper than he probably knew. I wanted to argue, to scream that I had every right to do something for myself, but I bit my tongue. Fighting with Richard was like talking to a brick wall, only less rewarding. Emily was no better. She walked in, her phone glued to her hand as always, and rolled her eyes when she saw us. Mom, are you still on about that shelter thing? Why can't you do something cool, like start a fashion blog or something? Because dogs are what I love, Em. I thought you'd be happy for me, I said, feeling the sting of her words. It hurt that my own daughter found my passion so unworthy. Dogs? Really, Mom? That's just sad. You need to get with the times. She scoffed, her words dripping with teenage condescension as she flopped down on the couch. I sighed, looking over at Richard for some sort of support, but he was too busy grooming his image in front of the mirror, fussing over a spot on his tie. Richard, do you hear how she talks to me? He barely glanced my way, adjusting his tie. Well, if you acted more like someone her age could respect, maybe she wouldn't talk to you like that. That stung. It really did. The dismissal from both of them was a cold reminder of what my life had become. Ignored and underestimated. But no more. This job at the shelter, it was mine. It was something I loved, something that brought me back to life after years of being whatever they needed. I went to bed that night with a plan. I wasn't going to let them tear me down anymore. I was good with animals, and the shelter needed me. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to find myself again after all these years of being lost in the shadows of my family. Richard always had a thing about appearances, his clothes pristine, his hair just so, every aspect of his public persona polished to a sheen. I'd spent the better part of our marriage ensuring his suits were lint-free, the creases sharp enough to cut glass. Image is everything in my line of work, Sarah. You know that, he'd remind me constantly, as if I could forget. Lately, though, something in me had started to slip. I was forgetting things, simple things, like the exact way he liked his coffee or the time of his next broadcast. You're not getting any younger, he'd joke, but the barb was always there, hidden under his chuckle. This particular evening, tension hung over dinner like a storm cloud. Emily, ever the echo of her father, was busy texting under the table, barely touching her food. I served Richard his coffee, my hands shaky from the day's stress. Sarah, where's the cardamom? Didn't I ask for it? Can't you do one thing right? His voice was sharp, each word a needle prick to my already deflating spirit. I thought I added it. Let me fix that, I muttered, fumbling through the spice cabinet while he tapped his foot impatiently. Watching me, Richard let out a heavy sigh. It's like you're not even here anymore. You're just so scattered. The bag of cardamom slipped from my fingers, scattering seeds across the tile. Oh, damn it! I exclaimed, more to myself than to him. Richard rolled his eyes, and Emily let out a snort of laughter from the table. Mom's losing it, Dad. Seriously, she can't even handle spices. She jeered, her voice dripping with disdain. I'm sorry, okay? I'm trying. I said, my voice low, the embarrassment burning my cheeks. Richard's frown deepened. Trying? No, you're failing, Sarah. This isn't just about cardamom or coffee. You're not yourself. You need to see someone, get checked out. I can't have you falling apart on me. His words stung, the implication clear, I was a problem that needed fixing. Emily's laughter echoed in my ears, a cruel soundtrack to my crumbling self-esteem. I started cleaning up, the seeds a tiny mess among bigger issues. Maybe I should see a doctor, I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to Richard or trying to convince myself. Maybe you should, he agreed quickly, a little too quickly, as if the idea pleased him. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. Plates clinked, forks scraped, and my mind whirled with fears of dementia and doctors. After dinner, I washed dishes, the warm water running over my hands while my thoughts spiraled dark and deep. Richard and Emily retreated to his office upstairs, their voices a murmur through the ceiling. Alone with the suds and my spiraling thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling of being fundamentally inadequate. Was I really losing my mind? The thought terrified me. Saturday had a way of sneaking up on you, all lazy sunshine and the promise of a little peace. I was cleaning up the kitchen, wiping down counters and humming some tuneless song when it hit me. I'd forgotten Richard's coffee cup in his office upstairs. My hands were still a bit damp as I reached the top of the stairs, my mind on autopilot, planning what to do next after retrieving the dishes. But as I neared his office door, voices trickled out, seeping under the crack like unwelcome water. I paused, recognizing Richard's voice, then Emily's lighter, laughing tone followed. Curiosity pricked me, urging me closer. Do you think your mother suspects anything at all? Richard's voice, usually so commanding on screen, sounded almost giddy. Emily laughed, that high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Mom? She's too busy scrubbing floors and feeding those mangy dogs. She doesn't see past the end of her nose. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper, but his words were clear as crystal. Once I bring Miranda here, things will change. We'll be better off. You like Miranda, don't you? Oh, Dad, I love her. She's amazing, smart, beautiful, everything Mom's not. She actually has a career, makes money. It'll be so cool to have her around. Exactly, my thoughts too. And once your mother is out of the way, we can live as we want. Miranda is eager to move in, start fresh with us. My heart pounded, the room spun, a carousel of betrayal and shock. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak, my breath shallow. This wasn't a conversation, it was a conspiracy. My family wasn't just slipping away from me, they were sprinting. I stumbled back downstairs, my mind racing, terror and disbelief jockeying for position. By the time I reached the living room, my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the sofa, my breaths coming in jagged pulls. I must have looked a sight because when Emily came down later, her brow furrowed slightly, a crack in her usual indifferent armor. Mom, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Her voice, tinged with faux concern, made my stomach churn. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time, a plan. But what? Just tired, honey. Very tired. I managed, my voice a hollow echo of normalcy. Okay, well, if you need something, I guess let me know. She shrugged, her detachment reassembling itself like armor as she turned away, leaving me adrift in the sea of my turmoil. Sunlight was already sneaking through the curtains when I woke up, my mind a tangled mess of dreams and nightmares, all mixing together until I couldn't tell one from the other. For a fleeting moment, I hoped that what I'd overheard last night was just another bad dream. I shuffled into the kitchen, still in my nightgown, my thoughts as disheveled as my hair. Richard and Emily were already there, their morning routine in full swing as if our world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Morning, I mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. The strong aroma did nothing to clear the fog in my brain. Good morning, Mom, Emily said, a little too cheerfully. Richard just nodded, his eyes glued to his phone. But then, their eyes met, and they shared a quick, secretive smile, a small, poisonous thing that didn't reach their eyes. That smile, it was like a slap, waking me up better than the strongest coffee ever could. They didn't know I'd seen it, but it was all the confirmation I needed that last night wasn't a figment of my imagination. I'm heading to the shelter today. Lots to do, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely acknowledged it, just nods and mumbles, their minds obviously elsewhere. As soon as breakfast was over, I made my way to the little cafe down the street where I'd agreed to meet Mark. The whole walk there, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the morning bustle around me. Mark was already there when I arrived, his face lighting up in a smile when he saw me. "Mom, are you okay? You look, I don't know, upset?" I forced a smile, but as I sat down, the facade crumbled. "Mark, I need to tell you something important," I started, my voice a shaky whisper. I told him everything, about the overheard conversation, the plans, the chilling disregard they had for me. Mark listened, his face hardening with every word. "Mom, are you sure you heard right? Maybe it was out of context?" I nodded, tears spilling over, despite my best efforts to keep them in check. "No, it was clear. They want me gone, Mark. What am I going to do?" He reached across the table, taking my hands in his. Okay, let's not panic. We'll sort this out. I'll call Dave's dad, he's a private detective. He can help us get to the bottom of this." True to his word, Mark pulled out his phone and dialed right there, explaining the situation in low, urgent tones. Within minutes, he'd arranged for us to meet the detective. We went to the detective's office, a cramped little space filled with files and the faint smell of old coffee. The detective, a grizzled man with sharp eyes, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This is serious, Mrs. Thompson. If what you're saying is true, we need to act quickly, but discreetly. I'll need some time to investigate, look into your husband's finances, his movements, check for any evidence of this woman he's involved with." Back home, I slipped back into my role, the doting wife and mother, my heart heavy, my smile forced. Richard and Emily were none the wiser, caught up in their own secretive world. Every look, every whisper between them felt like a knife twisting deeper, but I bore it silently, waiting for the day I could confront them with the truth, armed with more than just my broken heart. When the call came from the detective, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hold the phone steady. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk. It's urgent," he said, his voice a low rumble of seriousness that sent shivers down my spine. I agreed to meet him immediately, and Mark, sensing the gravity, decided to come along. We met at a nondescript coffee shop, a place where conversations could disappear into the hum of daily grind. The detective looked graver than the last time we'd seen him, his eyes sharp and assessing as we sat down. "Mrs. Thompson, we've uncovered quite a bit," he began, flipping open a small notebook brimming with notes. "Your husband's psychologist, if we can even call her that without spitting, is more than just a therapist. She's his lover, and they've been seeing each other for over a year." The words stung, each one a lash against the already raw edges of my betrayal. Mark's hand found mine under the table, a lifeline in the storm. "They're planning to get married," the detective continued. "And they don't plan on leaving you with much." How could he do this?" I whispered, my voice barely a thread of sound. "That's not even the worst part," the detective said grimly. "They've been drugging you. The lady friend suggested it, to make you appear unstable. They're using a powerful sedative, adding it to your tea. This would explain any memory lapses or confusion you've experienced recently." A cold dread settled over me, a fog so dense it threatened to choke. My own home, my sanctuary had become a trap. "The plan is to have you declared mentally unfit. They've even roped in some crooked doctors who would testify to your instability for a price," he added, his voice a blend of anger and pity. I felt sick, the coffee shop spinning around me. "My daughter, does she know about this?" "Yes, she's involved." His confirmation was a bullet, straight through whatever shred of hope I had left that Emily was still my little girl. We left the meeting with a plan simmering between us. At home, Richard greeted me with a cup of my favorite tea, his smile too sweet, too venomous. I took the cup with a trembling hand, my heart pounding against my chest like it wanted out. "Here, love, I made it just how you like it," Richard said, watching me with eyes I no longer recognized. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice a mask of normalcy over the scream inside. I waited for him to turn back to his newspaper, then I quietly poured the tea into the plant next to my chair, watching the liquid disappear into the soil. For the next several weeks, I played the part of the forgetful wife perfectly. I'd misplace keys, forget names, stumble over words. Richard and Emily watched with poorly veiled triumph, not knowing that with each act, I was silently sealing their fate. Richard's birthday was looming like a storm on the horizon. He had taken it upon himself to organize a lavish party, claiming it was because he couldn't trust me, the woman who couldn't remember the simplest things. "You're staying at home, Sarah," he had said with a patronizing tone that morning. "It's for the best, you know, with your condition." I nodded, a meek, submissive smile plastered on my face, while rage and resolve warred within me. "Of course, Richard. I wouldn't want to ruin your big day." As soon as the door shut behind Richard and Emily, my act dropped. I was on the phone with Mark within seconds. "It's time," I said, my voice a mix of nerves and determination. "I'm on my way, Mom. We'll show them," he replied, his tone as steely as mine felt. Dressed inconspicuously, we drove to the venue. The restaurant was buzzing with Richard's colleagues, friends, and even his well-groomed mistress, all gathered to celebrate. We slipped in unnoticed, taking cover behind a large pillar, just as Richard grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this special day," he began, his voice dripping with faux humility. "Sadly, Sarah couldn't make it tonight. She's not been herself lately," he sighed, the crowd murmuring their sympathy. But, on a brighter note, his smile widened. "I've just been offered my own evening show on a major channel. It's a dream come true." The room erupted in applause, people clinking glasses as Richard basked in the adulation. That was our cue. I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. We moved toward the stage, my heart thumping in my chest like a drum. Just as the applause died down, we stepped into the light. Richard's face went from joyous to ashen in seconds, his eyes wide with shock. Mark didn't hesitate. He strode up and smoothly took the microphone from Richard's hand. "If I could have your attention, please," he announced. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. "I have a special gift for my father and his beloved," Mark continued, his voice calm but loud. A projector whirred to life behind us, and images flooded the screen, photos of Richard and his mistress, their intimacy undeniable. Whispers crescendoed into gasps as video clips rolled, their cozy dinners, their sneaky exits from her apartment. Then the audio played, clear and damning, discussions of drugging me, of bribing doctors, all to steal my place in this house, in this family. Richard and his mistress exchanged desperate looks, trapped by their own deceit. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and anger vibrating through the air. I took the microphone from Mark, my hand steady, despite the turmoil around us. "I am not as ill as my husband hoped," I declared, my voice strong and clear. What you see on this screen, I arranged for this gift, especially for his mistress." The scandal erupted right then and there, the mistress fleeing the room with Richard stumbling after her. As the room buzzed with the aftershock, one of Richard's relatives approached me. "I recorded everything, Sarah. It's all on video. I'll send it to you," he whispered, handing me his business card. After the explosive reveal at Richard's birthday bash, the fallout was immediate and merciless. The video of his betrayal and scheming went viral overnight, replayed on every gossip show and news outlet you could think of. Richard, who had always craved the spotlight, finally got his wish, though not in the way he had hoped. The backlash was swift. His once promising career on television crumbled, the network dropped him like a hot potato, citing moral clauses and public outrage. Meanwhile, I took steps to untangle myself from the man I once vowed to stand by. My lawyer was a godsend, a no-nonsense woman who cut through the legal jargon and helped me file for divorce. The evidence was overwhelming, and the court had no qualms in granting me not only the divorce, but also a hefty financial compensation from Richard and his mistress. The fact that they had drugged me made it a criminal matter, too, but my focus was on severing ties, not extending court battles. Sarah, you've secured lifelong alimony, and the house is yours. They can't touch you financially anymore, my lawyer announced with a satisfied smirk when it was all over. The mistress, Miranda, a once respected psychologist, saw her career disintegrate. Her license was revoked following an investigation into her unethical behavior. The doctors she colluded with faced similar fates, their medical licenses stripped and reputations tarnished. With no career and mounting legal fees, Miranda sold her office and took out loans to fulfill the court's compensation orders. Last I heard, she and Richard were living together in a cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Karma, as they say, can be quite the equalizer. During all this upheaval, my daughter Emily came to me, tears in her eyes, remorse finally breaking through her previously cold demeanor. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong. Can I stay with you?" Her words stung, reopening wounds that had barely started to heal. "Emily, I love you. You're my daughter, and that will never change. But you chose to side with your father, knowing what he planned for me. I think it's time you learn what real consequences feel like." She moved out the next day, her belongings stuffed into too many bags, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her choices. Last I heard, she was living with Richard and Miranda, the atmosphere there as strained as one would expect. Richard tried to reach out once, a call I let go to voicemail. His message was a mix of self-pity and blame, a cocktail I no longer had the taste for. "Sarah, I hope we can talk. There are things I need to explain," the voice said, trailing off into a sigh. I deleted the message, the final note of his voice swept away with a single tap. After everything that went down, here I am, back in the world of dogs, my first love and passion. I'm not just working at the shelter anymore, I've started offering private dog training courses right here at home. My backyard has transformed into a haven for all things canine, agility equipment, training mats, and more toys than you can shake a stick at. "Mom, this place looks amazing," Mark said on one of his frequent visits. He walked around with a proud smile as he watched me put a rowdy pup through its paces. "Thanks, honey. It feels right, you know? Like I've found my way back to where I was always meant to be," I replied, tossing a ball for an overly enthusiastic golden retriever. The scandal, though a nightmare at the time, strangely did wonders for my business. Clients started pouring in, some admittedly curious about the scandal, but they stayed for the results. "I'll be honest, Sarah, I first heard about you from the news," one of my clients, a friendly woman with a stubborn dachshund, confessed during a session. "But I saw how you handled Bella here, and I knew the news wasn't the real story. You're the real deal." I laughed, giving Bella an affectionate pat as she finally nailed the sit-stay command we'd been working on. "I appreciate that. It's good to know my 15 minutes of fame brought me some genuinely nice clients." It's not all about dogs, though. Mark comes around a lot, helping me with the heavier tasks around the yard, his company a constant reminder of how much good there still is in my life. "Mom, you ever think about how things turned out? You know, after everything?" Mark asked one afternoon as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "All the time," I admitted, sipping my tea. "It was tough, really tough. But look at this, I'm happy, Mark. Really happy. I wouldn't change a thing." He nodded, a knowing grin spreading across his face. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You turned a mess into a message." And he's right. I did. I get to spend my days doing what I love, surrounded by wagging tails and wet noses. The peace and contentment that fills my days now is something I used to dream about during those dark times. "Hey, Mom, think you'll ever forgive him?" "Dad, I mean?" Mark asked one evening, the question hanging in the air like smoke. I thought about it, really thought about it. "I've moved on, but forgive? Not. And that's okay. I've learned that some things you just have to let be. That's the truth of it. I found strength I never knew I had, and a resilience that's seen me through the worst of storms. The days are long, filled with barks and laughs, and as I close the gate each evening, I look up at the stars, grateful for the quiet ending to another day filled with life. Working in the high-end furniture game, you meet all sorts. But Jake? He was something else. Every Thursday, like clockwork, he'd stroll into the showroom with a coffee in hand and a lopsided grin that said he owned the place, even though he never bought squat. I remember the first time he walked in. I was arranging a display of Italian leather sofas, real pricey stuff. He sauntered over, his eyes scanning the price tags, but not in the way most folks do. "Hey there," he started, leaning too close to a lamp that cost more than most people's rent. "What's the story with this one? Looks comfy enough to sleep on forever." I smirked, stepping in before he could test that theory. "It's handcrafted. Top of the line. But yeah, definitely not for napping." Jake chuckled, running a hand through his messy hair. "Guess I'll have to keep my shoes off then." We chatted, mostly him asking about the furniture, me trying to gauge if he was serious about buying anything. Turns out, he wasn't. That first day, he left with a wave and a "see you around." One slow afternoon, he dropped by with that same casual swagger. The store was dead, which meant I couldn't avoid a longer convo. "So, Elsie, right? You ever get tired of talking about couches and tables all day?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "It pays the bills. Besides, it's not so bad." "What's your deal anyway? You come in here all the time but never buy anything. Are you in the biz or just like messing with me?" Jake's laugh was a full-bodied sound that filled the room. "Nah, I'm not messing with you. Just like the vibe here, I guess. Plus, you're kinda fun to talk to." That day, he stayed longer than usual. We talked about everything, music, movies, you name it. He had an opinion on everything and a story to match. When he finally left, he turned at the door. "Hey, Elsie? You wanna grab coffee sometime? Outside of these expensive walls?" I hesitated. This was new territory. "Sure, why not? But if you're planning to run a tab there too, I'm bringing a calculator." "Deal," he said with a laugh, and then he was gone. Coffee with Jake became our thing. Every time we met, he'd pick a spot as eclectic as the furniture he never bought. Each cup of coffee felt like a continuation of a conversation that never really ended. It flowed from furniture to life plans, from jokes to personal dreams. A year flew by since Jake and I started dating. He had this knack for making ordinary days feel like little adventures. It wasn't just coffee dates anymore. We had road trips, late-night movie marathons, and lazy Sundays spent wandering through flea markets. He seemed genuine, you know? Like a real stand-up guy. Then, out of the blue, during a picnic in the city park, nothing fancy, just us and some takeaway sandwiches, Jake got down on one knee. I almost choked on my soda. "Elsie, will you marry me?" he asked, holding up a ring that caught the sunlight just right. I laughed, half because I was nervous, and half because it felt so right. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. I want all my tomorrows to start with you." His eyes were all hopeful, like a kid waiting to see if he'd won the top prize at a carnival game. I didn't need to think about it. Yes, Jake. Of course, yes. The next thing was meeting his folks. Jake had mentioned them, but we hadn't spent time together, and from what he said, they were a bit uptight. He decided it was time to introduce me properly, so he planned a dinner at their place. When we arrived, their house was, let's just say, eclectic. Every corner crammed with some fancy piece from a different era or style. It was like walking into a museum where all the exhibits got mixed up. Jake's mom, Lydia, was as cold as the November air when she opened the door. "You must be Elsie," she said, eyeing me like I was a piece of furniture she couldn't quite place. "Yes, nice to meet you," I managed, trying not to let her scrutiny get to me. We sat down to dinner, and the vibe was stiff. Jake tried to lighten the mood, but his dad, Harold, only thought a bit after Jake mentioned my job at the luxury salon. "So, you work with expensive furniture? Designer pieces?" Harold asked, his tone shifting from indifferent to slightly intrigued. "That's right," I said. "I help people choose pieces that work for their homes." Lydia perked up too. "And you have savings? That's good. Very good." The conversation slowly turned to their interest in my financial stability rather than getting to know me. It was awkward, but I played along. After dinner, Lydia cornered me in their living room turned bizarre showroom. "Elsie, dear, could you suggest something for this room? It feels a bit cluttered," she said, waving a dismissive hand around. I looked around, biting my tongue to avoid saying it looked like a yard sale gone mad. Instead, I put on my professional smile. "Well, you might consider streamlining the styles. Maybe pick a theme or a period you like and build around that. There are some great, affordable alternatives to these high-end pieces that can give you a cohesive look without breaking the bank." Lydia's nose wrinkled. "I don't want alternatives. I want the real deal, the stuff you sell in your store. I just thought, with your discount or whatever, you could help us out." The way she said it, like I owed them something, irked me. But Jake was watching us, a hopeful look in his eyes, like he wanted this to go well. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally, even though I knew I'd be careful about any help I offered. Wedding talks with Jake and his parents were like walking into a hurricane and trying to stop the wind. His folks had their hearts set on a blowout bash. But here's the kicker. Lydia, with her taste for the finer things, dropped this gem during dinner one night. "Women always dream of big weddings, so they should foot the bill, right?" Her smirk told me she wasn't just throwing ideas around. She meant it. I nearly choked on my water. "Well, Lydia, this woman dreams of a simple wedding. We're not breaking the bank or my sanity over one day." Jake, caught in the crossfire, gave me that look, the "please go easy on my mom" look. "But nah, not this time." "Elsie's right," he finally said, though his voice had the weight of a man walking to the gallows. "We'll keep it simple." The wedding day came, and true to my word, it was simple, beautiful, but understated. Jake's parents plastered on their best sour grapes faces throughout the ceremony. I caught Lydia muttering to a relative, "You'd think a girl who sells fancy furniture could put on a better show." I let it slide. The day was about us, not them. I was floating, my heart full, as I said I do, to a modest gathering of our closest friends and family in the little garden behind our favorite cafe. Post-wedding life kicked off with Jake suggesting we rent a large apartment. "You can deck it out just how you like," he said, knowing full well his bank account was running on fumes. "I'll pitch in when things pick up for me." So, I signed a lease for a chic place that cost a pretty penny, $2,500 a month. My savings took the hit for the furniture and appliances. I went all out, styling it into a space that could have graced the pages of a design mag. When his parents visited, Lydia's eyes nearly popped out. "This place, it's like something out of a movie," she gasped, touching the suede of the couch like it might vanish. "I want this. All of this." Jake beamed like he'd built the place himself. "Elsie has an eye for style," he boasted to his friends over drinks one evening, the apartment serving as the perfect backdrop for his tall tales of taste. "But the bills? All mine. Rent checks, furniture receipts, you name it." My bank account knew the truth, even if Jake was playing the part of the man of the house. One particularly sharp memory was when Lydia pulled me aside during one of their visits, her voice a mix of honey and vinegar. "Elsie, darling, maybe you could help us do the same with our place? Since you're so good with money and all." The way she said it, like I was some kind of cash wizard, it almost made me laugh. Almost. "Lydia, decorating's one thing, but managing money's another. You start with a budget, something realistic." Her face fell. Clearly, budget was a dirty word in her book. But I wasn't about to school my mother-in-law on finances on top of everything else. The grind at the luxury furniture salon paid off. After months of hustling, the bosses noticed, and bam, promotion landed in my lap. They shuffled me over to the wholesale department, a whole new game with bigger clients and bulk deals. The team there was tight-knit, but they welcomed me with open arms. One person, in particular, made the transition smoother, my new boss, Sarah. She was around my age, sharp as a tack, and had an eye for design that even I admired. We clicked right off the bat, swapping stories about nightmare clients and dream projects over coffee breaks. One evening, back at our plush apartment that I'd decked out from my own pocket, I mentioned Sarah to Jake over dinner. "She's got this killer instinct for deals, you know? Closed two just this week that everyone thought were dead in the water," I said, passing him the salt. Jake, munching on his spaghetti, looked intrigued. "Sounds like a powerhouse. We should have her over for dinner, show off some of your handiwork here. Might be good for your career, huh?" So, we invited Sarah over the following weekend. I spent the day tidying up, while Jake decided he was Gordon Ramsay. The menu was his doing: roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans, fancy, but not too over the top. Sarah arrived on time, her eyes widening as she stepped into the living room. "Wow, Elsie, this place is incredible. You did all this?" "All her," Jake chimed in, leading her on a tour. "Wait till you see the dining setup." Dinner was lively, thanks to Jake. He was on a roll, cracking jokes, refilling glasses, laughing a little too loud. At some point, he was more of a host than I was in my own home. I caught him a few times, being extra attentive to Sarah, laughing a touch too heartily at her jokes, which were funny but not that funny. It bugged me enough that I pulled him aside while Sarah was in the restroom. "Hey, what's with the show?" I whispered, nodding toward the dining room. Jake kept his voice low, a serious look crossing his face for just a second. "I am trying to impress her. For you. Maybe she'll speed up another promotion or something." I frowned. "I don't need you to charm my boss for a promotion, Jake. I can handle my career." When Sarah came back, we rounded off the evening with dessert, chocolate cake, Sarah's favorite, as I'd mentioned to Jake. He listened, at least when it suited his plans. After Sarah left, praising the meal and the company, Jake slumped on the couch, grinning like he'd won a prize. "See? Told you it'd go great." I sat beside him, not quite sharing the sentiment. "It was nice, but don't do that again. I don't need a show, just be normal next time." Jake just waved a hand, dismissing my concerns as he turned on the TV. "You worry too much. It was fine." But it wasn't fine, not really. His act felt off, like he was playing a part. Since the promotion, my paycheck had grown nicely, which, naturally, led Jake to find new ways to spend it. First up, his wardrobe. "Babe, I can't keep wearing these old suits. If you want me to be promoted too, I gotta look the part," he'd argued one evening, thumbing through a catalog of designer suits that cost more than our rent. "Fine, we'll update your closet. But keep it sensible, okay?" I conceded, figuring if it boosted his confidence, it might help him in his own career. The new Jake was a dapper one, and he was all too eager to show off his revamped style. Not long after the wardrobe overhaul, he had another idea. How about dinner out with Sarah again? Could be fun, right? It sounded harmless enough, so I agreed. The night was a success, full of laughter and pricey wine. At the end of the evening, when the check came, Jake made a show of grabbing it. "Let me get that for you," he told Sarah with a flourish. She smiled, a bit awkwardly. "Oh, you don't have to, but thank you, Jake." Then, with his hand on the leather folder, he leaned in close to me. "Babe, can you cover this? Just play along." Puzzled and slightly annoyed, I nodded, slipping my card to the waiter while Sarah was distracted. Jake was beaming like he'd just closed a major deal, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being played in my own life. This pattern didn't stop. Dinners turned into weekend getaways, which Jake insisted on initiating, and I unwittingly financed. He'd tell Sarah, "Don't worry about the cost, we've got it," while winking at me across the room. It was during one such trip, a luxurious beach resort stay, that I hit my breaking point. As I signed yet another exorbitant bill, Jake clapped me on the back. "Isn't this great? Sarah's having a wonderful time. Good for your career, this." That night, in our hotel room, I confronted him. "Jake, I can't keep this up. These trips, these dinners. It's too much. We're supposed to be a team, but I feel like your bank more than your wife." Jake's face darkened, his voice cold and sharp. "I'm doing this for you, for us. If you can't see that, maybe you should just enjoy it alone. I'm busting my ass here trying to help your career." After that, things changed. Jake started staying late at work, or at least that's what he said. Sudden meetings, unexpected calls, it became his new normal. I was sad, sure, but also furious. I wasn't going to be his meal ticket anymore. The joy of our dinners and trips had soured, turning into a reminder of how much I was losing, not just money, but a partner I thought I knew. The call from Sarah to come to her office immediately sent a cold wave of anxiety through me. What could it be? My mind raced with every possible mistake I might have made, every deadline, every email. I knocked on her office door, my heart hammering in my chest, and stepped inside. Sarah was sitting behind her desk, her expression serious, the usual warmth absent. My gaze fell on an alarming number of bouquets and unopened gift boxes piled in one corner. "Elsie, please, have a seat," she gestured to the chair across from her. "We need to talk about something important." Her tone was so grave it made my stomach turn. I sat down, clutching my hands in my lap, preparing for the worst. Sarah sighed, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of concern and discomfort. "It's about Jake," she started, and my heart sank. "His behavior has been, well, inappropriate." I blinked, confused. "Inappropriate how?" She gestured to the gifts. "He's been sending these. Flowers, jewelry, even designer clothes. It's excessive and, frankly, uncomfortable for me. He's crossing professional and personal boundaries, Elsie." I felt a hot flush of embarrassment. I had no idea," I stammered, feeling naive and foolish. Sarah leaned forward, her voice softening. "I value our friendship, and I respect you immensely, Elsie. That's why I need to be honest. He's making advances. I've told him repeatedly that I'm not interested, that I see him only as your husband, but he isn't listening." I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah. I'll handle it." My voice was a whisper, barely holding back tears. I got home, still reeling, only to find Jake in the living room, a suitcase by his side. His demeanor was light, almost giddy, which only fueled my growing anger. "There you are. I've got news." He beamed at me impudently, as if oblivious to the storm inside me. "I've decided it's time for a fresh start. Quit my job today, and I think it's best if my parents move in here. You should find another place." His words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about, Jake? Your parents? Why would I leave?" He shrugged, annoyingly calm. "Come on, Elsie. This place is too good for just us. And let's be honest, it fits their style more. Plus, you can afford another spot, no big deal, right?" I stared at him, disbelief and anger intertwining. "No big deal? You cheat, you lie, you spend my money, and now you kick me out? Whoa, cheat? What are you on about?" His feigned ignorance was infuriating. "Don't play dumb, Jake. Sarah told me everything, the gifts, the advances. How could you?" My voice cracked, tears threatening to spill. Jake's face hardened. "So what? She's richer and more promising than you, so I just want to get a better life. Just pack up and go, Elsie." His words were a dagger, cutting through any remaining ties of affection I had for him. That night, I lay in the spare bedroom, the reality of my crumbling marriage suffocating me. Jake's betrayal was clear, his intentions laid bare. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I had found a new apartment online, a smaller, quieter place that felt like a fresh start. I signed the lease electronically and called the movers, all before Jake had even stirred from his sleep. As the movers started arriving, I was methodically showing them around, pointing out what to take. I'd gathered all the receipts and proofs of purchase for the furniture, my furniture, that I'd paid for with my hard-earned money. I was ready, determined. Jake stumbled out of the bedroom, bleary-eyed and confused as he saw the movers loading up boxes. "What's going on, Elsie? Why are you taking the furniture?" I held up the folder stuffed with receipts. "Because it's mine. I bought it, I paid for it, and it's coming with me. Any questions?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, the reality hitting him as his eyes swept over the evidence in my hands. Just then, his parents burst through the door. His mother, Lydia, took one look at the scene, movers carrying out chairs and tables, and she lost it. "Stop. Stop right now. Put my furniture back." The movers paused, looking unsure. I nodded firmly at them. "Keep going, guys. It's all documented." Lydia was frantic, her voice rising in panic as she turned to Jake. "How are we supposed to live here without any furniture? What are we going to do?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, don't worry, Lydia. I'm sure Jake's new girlfriend will furnish your lives splendidly," I said, the sarcasm dripping from every word. His mother looked at him hopefully, her eyes darting back and forth between the emptying apartment and her son. "And your little boss is going to buy us all this? Is she going to take care of us now?" I shook my head, almost in disbelief at their audacity. "Actually, I spoke to her yesterday. She wants nothing to do with you or Jake. She's sending back every ridiculous gift he bought." The look on Jake's face was priceless, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and a realization that his schemes were crumbling around him. Lydia's wrath turned to her son as she poked him hard in the chest. "You fool. We could have had a good life here with Elsie supporting us, and you ruined it." Jake's desperation was palpable as he turned to me, his voice shaky. "Elsie, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can start over." I handed him an envelope, the divorce papers I had prepared. "This is the only thing left to start over. My lawyer will call you." As I walked out of the apartment, I didn't look back. I was leaving behind more than just a bad marriage and a duplicitous husband. I was leaving behind the old Elsie who tolerated far too much. Settling into my new apartment was like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for too long. The place wasn't as large as the last, but every square inch of it was mine, truly mine. I threw myself into decorating, picking pieces that weren't just stylish but spoke to my newfound independence. I went for bold colors this time, vibrant blues and emerald greens, each room a testament to starting over. Meanwhile, Jake and his parents weren't faring so well. Last I heard, they couldn't keep up with the $2,500 rent without my paycheck and had to downsize dramatically. They ended up in a cramped, run-down place on the other side of town. Jake refused to settle for a regular job. He bounced around, looking for another golden ticket, while his mom, Lydia, had no choice but to get a retail job. Their palace built on expectations had crumbled, and from what snippets I caught through mutual friends, so had their tolerance for each other. Then, one afternoon as I was setting up a new art piece in the living room, my phone rang. The sweet, sugary tone of Lydia's voice oozed through the speaker when I answered. "Elsie, darling, it's Lydia. How have you been? We've all missed you so much over here." I almost dropped the phone, half laughing, half in disbelief. "Missed me, Lydia, or my paycheck? Let me guess, you want me to come back? To what? Watch Jake chase dreams while I foot the bill? No thanks, Lydia." "You don't understand, Elsie, we're family." She tried again, her voice now a mix of desperation and saccharine. "Family?" I scoffed. "Family doesn't use each other, Lydia. You should try supporting yourselves for a change." Before she could respond, I hung up and blocked the number. That part of my life was closed, sealed, and good riddance to it. In contrast to the chaos that was my past life, my career was flourishing. Sarah and I had grown closer, her respect for me solidifying after I handled the personal turmoil with as much grace as I could muster. She hinted last week that another promotion was on the horizon, something that would put me even more in control of my professional path. It was like the universe rewarding me for all the hardships. One evening, sitting in my newly decorated living room, I reflected on everything that had happened. The apartment looked incredible, a true reflection of my style and spirit. I had new friends coming over that night, colleagues who appreciated me for my skills and company, not for what my bank account could do for them. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door to smiling faces, genuine and happy to see me. As we gathered around the sleek, modern dining table I'd picked out myself, laughter filled the space, bouncing off walls that echoed a new chapter of my life.